Assalamu alaikum. This segment should be really a series of 3 parts. I decided to combine them all in one segment because we have some people who are intent on attacking and criticizing this channel, regardless on whether or not we put them as long segments or short segments. If we tell them this is part of a long series, watch the whole series, they don't do it anyway. If we put all of this information in one segment, maybe they will watch it, maybe they won't. But for the sake of completeness, I've decided to make it a longer segment and put all the relevant information in one segment. Inshallah, you will be patient and watch it. If you cannot watch it all at the same time, watch it in pieces. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help you to gain from it the knowledge that is intended to be delivered through this segment. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. This segment is titled Quraysh versus Muhammad. Who won? In this segment, we will discuss so many different topics, so many related topics. So please take it seriously and watch the whole thing. If you can watch it in one sitting, that's great. Make sure you take notes. Make sure you follow through on the recommendations. And do your own diligence to make sure that what we're claiming and what we're concluding and presenting and disclosing makes sense to you. At the end of the day, the responsibility for the ownership of this information belongs to you. We present the evidence, we present the conclusions as we see them. Inshallah, you will agree. If you don't agree, come up with an alternate explanation. You owe it to yourself to reflect on these issues and learn. So we will discuss the roots of disagreement between our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Muhammad, and Quraysh. We will see the Quran scandalizes Quraysh and tells us exactly what was the root of the disagreement. You will see for yourself. We will review the Abrahamic Locution in a little bit more detail than we presented it before. We owe it to you. This has been a long time since we really talked about the Abrahamic Locution per se. And you will see, inshallah, that we have a lot of solid foundation to claim the claims that we make about the Abrahamic Locution being at the center of the Quranic stories. We will talk about the concept of Millat Ibrahim. We will talk about the story of Shuayb. Who was Shuayb? We will also present information about why did the Arabs not understand the Quran, and you will see for yourself. You will make your own conclusion. Inshallah, the evidence that we present will be more than convincing, and you will see. And then we will conclude with, why does the Quran appear so enigmatic to us today? Was it done on purpose? Was there some serious mistake, some serious deliberate mistake, perhaps made very early in the life of Islam after the revelation of the Quran, after the death of our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam? You will see for yourself. Please remember, this is an academic, scholarly presentation. Sometimes I get tired of hearing myself say this, but people just don't seem to listen. This is an academic presentation. That means you need to have the intellectual wherewithal and the patience and the time and watch the whole thing before you decide to criticize. I realize that this is gonna irk some people, that this is gonna create some problem, some existential crisis for some people. Still, take the time, you owe it to yourself before you mislead yourself and mislead others, to watch the whole thing and understand the inner logic of these presentations before you criticize. Please, this is not for entertainment purposes. If you don't have the time or the patience, don't watch. And if you decide to watch it, please watch it in full. Remember, we base our interpretations and translations on the Abrahamic Locution. We will define exactly what that is. We have defined it before, but we will go over it again. We use the organic Quranic methodology. This is a methodology that's extracted from within the Quran. We ascribe to the concept of evidence-based knowledge. We accept the truth from the Quran above all else. Knowledge comes from Allah. Evidence for such knowledge comes from the Quran, and we accept the Quran above anything else. If there is a disagreement between the Quran and what any other source says, we accept the Quran, as long as we're confident that we're interpreting the Quran correctly. So please don't ask or criticize unless you have watched the whole segment and unless you have the wherewithal, the intellectual tools to really understand in the first place. If you don't, you're just going to be embarrassing yourself. So in this segment, we're going to cover basically 3 parts and a conclusion. The first part deals with the Abrahamic locution. We're going to go quite a bit in detail. It's going to be technical, yes, but it's going to be easy to understand. So if you're patient, you will learn a lot. You will learn the terminology that the Quran chooses to describe itself, the real terminology, not the terminology they told us in these old books. You will see for yourself. We will discuss the concept of Millat Ibrahim. This is going to be shocking disclosure to many people. The very word Millat Ibrahim has been so misunderstood and so corrupted in its interpretation that it left a vast majority of the Quran totally misunderstood, and you will see for yourself. We will deal with many different questions relating to Ibrahim himself, including why does the Quran describe him as Hanif? Why does the Quran describe him as Khaleel? Why does the Quran describe him as Imam? We've discussed some of these issues before, but again, for the sake of completeness, I'm including all of these things in this one segment, one major scholarly segment, so that we can really have all of this information in one place. Incidentally, the notes are available on our website. If you go to our website and if you are subscribed to our website, you have access to the notes. So please make use of the notes file, which I will make available immediately as soon as this video uploads on YouTube. Then the third part, we will ask who was Shuayb, and we will discuss, was Shuayb a Nabi or a Rasul? They told us he was a Nabi. We will see what the Quran says about him. We will also ask what was the main disagreement between Shuayb and his community, the community to whom he was sent. And then finally, we will ask, how did the conflict between Shuayb and his community end? And as a conclusion to this segment, we will offer some concluding remarks and some recommendations. Most importantly, we will ask, did the Arabs understand the Quran? And you will see it is a shocking answer. We will start by clearing one of the biggest misconceptions about the word Arabic or the Arabs in general. One of the biggest misconceptions is that the Arabs had one language. This is absolutely not true. The Arabs did not have a single language. So when you hear someone telling you Arabic is the language of the Arabs, he is lumping all the Arabs across all of history, across all geographies in one bucket and saying they spoke one language, which is absolutely not true. And you can look around today and we will provide evidence for you to see today and in the past. For reference, please refer to this book, Tarikh Adab al-Arab, written by Mustafa Sadiq al-Rafi'i, a major scholar who died in 1937 Common Era. He wrote this book, Tarikh Adab al-Arab. In it, he discusses in detail the history of linguistic variations among Arab tribes between geographies of the north and geographies of the south of the Arabian Peninsula, and he proves that they did not speak the same language. As a matter of fact, they have so many different variations that it could rarely be called the same language, and yet it was lumped under a single description called Arabic. We will see what that means throughout this conversation that we will have today, inshallah. Furthermore, not only this was true before the Quran, it was also true after the Quran. Still, even after the Quran was revealed, the Arabs differed in how they used their own so-called Arabic language. This concept is elaborated further by another book called Al-Madaris An-Nahwiyya, written by Dr. Shu3ayb, one major scholar of Arabic. Incidentally, both of them are Egyptians. Dr. Shu3ayb died in 2005, so he's very contemporary, very recent. In this book, he discusses major variations among various schools of grammarians and linguists, Arabic grammarians and linguists, even after the Quran. So he discusses the difference between the Baghdadi school, the Kufi school, the Basra school, the Andalusia school, the Egyptian school. Every one of those different schools treated and dealt with the grammar and linguistics of the Arabic in dramatically different ways. And their disagreement was very real. And to this day, there continue to be disagreements in interpreting basic constructs of the Arabic language. So when someone tells you there is a single Arabic language, they're lying to you, or they're totally ignorant about the linguistics and the history of Arabic. So please don't be taken by someone who tells you Arabic is the language of the Arabs. That's a huge misconception, because there is not a single language called Arabic. Well, the Quran talks about Arabic. What is it talking about? We will see. First, empty some of the misconceptions that you have so that you have room to learn new things. Inshallah, we will continue with learning more things. So the concept of Lissān, we were told by some of the critics of this channel, insisting that Lissān means tongue, which refers to language. And to them, it was a done deal. Arabic, that's it. No, it's not true. Lissān literally means tongue, yes, as in the physical muscle, yes, but the language itself does not come from your tongue. The language comes from somewhere else. If you think you understand the word language, keep paying attention, because you will see language means something totally different than what they told us. So language does not come from the tongue. An important distinction to note: Arabic is not the language of the Arabs, as we said. To the contrary, Arabs were referred to as Arabs because they spoke one or another form of this Arabic. Sometimes not perfectly. Sometimes they did not agree among themselves. Still, it was referred to as Arabic because it was expressive, because it had certain rules that most of them agreed on. And therefore, the word Arabic is based on Araba, which means to express. So it's a very expressive way of presenting information. It was referred to as Arabic. The Quran shows it, we will see, for reasons that are really critical. We will understand a little bit more when we deal with the concept of Millat Ibrahim. It's very important to conclude with this remark: relegating the linguistic authority, which is al-hukm as we defined it, the linguistic discernment provided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, relegating this linguistic authority to human beings, be they Arabs or non-Arabs, human beings, granting them dominance over the meanings of the words of Allah. Please pay attention. Relegating the linguistic authority to a group of people over the words of Allah, when otherwise clear evidence is provided in the Quran, is actually worse than shirk. Shirk is when you personally associate with Allah another source. But relegating to another group of human beings dominance over the meanings, the discernment, the linguistic distinction and boundaries of each word used by Allah. When you assign a group of human beings to dominate over the words of Allah, not only you are committing shirk, you are misleading others who come after you. You are literally obstructing the Muslim's connection with Allah. Because Allah tells us in the Quran, Inna Allah la yaghfiru an yushraka bih. Allah does not grant a connection with Him to someone who associates with Him. So if you commit shirk, you're committing shirk against yourself. But if you're teaching people that the Arabic is the language of the Arabs, and therefore the Arabs have the right to determine the meanings of the words of the Quran, even in the presence of clear evidence otherwise in the Quran, you are preventing others from connecting to Allah. It is actually worse than shirk. So please take this seriously and heed this instruction, heed this reminder. Don't play loose with the words of Allah. Don't put yourself as a misguide to the words of Allah and the locution that Allah used in the divine lexicon of the Quran. Take it seriously. So to start with some detailed discussion, we will go into a linguistic terminology. This is a little bit theoretical, not very much. I included a lot of diagrams. I included a lot of information so that you guys can take it easy and learn the words. We only have a couple of words that we really need to learn. But once we learn them and internalize the concepts, no one will be able to mislead you. You will not allow anyone to push you in the wrong direction away from really understanding the Quran. So before we start, I'd like to remind you about segment YT91 titled, Why Did the Quran Not Mention Chinese Prophets, etc. the difference between language and locution. We discussed in an elementary way the concept of the Abrahamic locution. And I gave the examples that some Arabs use Arabic, but they have different locution. And therefore, I never said that locution is not Arabic. I don't know why the critics of this channel are lying about this concept. They're saying Dr. Hani is saying locution of the Quran is not Arabic. Bogus, I never said that. Bring me evidence where I said this. As a matter of fact, they're hiding this segment from their own audience because they know they will be scandalized by their own audience if their audience watches this segment. As a matter of fact, I gave the example of Arabs from different countries speaking different locutions. I'm not talking about dialects. I'm talking about Arabs using Arabic in different ways, even the proper Arabic. One country understands one word in one way, another country understands the same word in a different way. Different locution within the same language. We're going to see the diagrams as you will see. Also in this segment, I gave this example for the English language. I said, if you hear someone use the word chap or lad or lorry in the British English, that makes sense. In an American English, we use different words, man or truck, etc. Both of these examples are from the same language, English, and yet each one is using a different locution. And therefore, locution is localized to a group of people or a time limit or within a certain contextual constraint, such as a community of practice, for example, etc. So every group has their own locution. Many groups may be under the same language umbrella, but each has their own locution. We also use the example in Australian, they use mate, whereas in American, they use friend. Therefore, we were very clear, locution is not in contrast to language. No one said that the locution of the Quran is not Arabic. No one said that. So we will discuss more detail in this segment. So I want to refer you to a person called Ferdinand de Saussure, who was a Swiss scientist. In the modern era, he's the first one who talked about linguistics and provided the vocabulary. I'm going to use his vocabulary, not because he's superior to what the Arab linguists have done. We have in our history phenomenal Arab linguists who have written about this. One of them is Abdul Qahir al-Jirjani, a very famous scholar who wrote about the concept of the linguistics of the Quran. But regardless, because we're using the English language, I want to use the vocabulary of Ferdinand de Saussure. So Ferdinand de Saussure distinguishes between two words. The word langue, which means language, this is a French word, and the word parole, which means locution. So when we use the word locution in English in this channel, we are referring to what Saussure referred to as parole. What is parole? We will see in just a second. What is langue? So langue in the Saussure type of terminology refers to the full language. So when we say, for example, everything included when we use the word Arabic, everything, whether or not certain people speak it today or yesterday, is irrelevant. The language itself as an abstract concept is referred to as langue, which literally means tongue. Therefore, this is where the confusion came from. So, but to Saussure, he's not talking about the individual speech. That individual speech is referred to as locution, parole. So therefore, there's a difference between what a single specific individual uses as a subset of the whole language. That subset that a single person uses in their regular speech is referred to as parole or locution. Therefore, language is the full concept of every possible way of expressing everything according to that language. And that is almost infinite for the language such as Arabic, because it has literally thousands upon thousands of roots, and each root can be taken in hundreds of different morphemes using the morphology of the Arabic language. And then these words can be combined in almost infinite number of ways to create sentences. So there is almost no bound to the Arabic language. I say almost because we don't really know the real number of terms and morphemes. According to Abdullah al-Alayli, a major scholar of the Arabic language, he cataloged over 700 morphemes for each root in the Arabic language. And according to some dictionaries, there are over 25,000 roots for the Arabic language. So 25,000 times 700, that's just the number of words. Now you combine that with the very flexible syntax of the Arabic language to create expressions and metaphors and idioms and sentences, and you literally have a boundless language. So when we say language, we're referring to this almost infinite number of ways of expressing anything in the Arabic language. That is different than the limited speech patterns or discourse or parole or locution of a single individual. A single individual, by definition, is limited to what he knows and she speaks and she can use to express. Now, when two people, A and B, are trying to communicate with each other, they each bring their own locution. So the first person brings locution A, the second person brings locution B. So how do they communicate? Well, there is inevitably a common area of intersection between the two through which they communicate. So I may use the word mango and you have no clue what mango is. It's not part of your locution. You've lived in, the northern hemisphere, the extreme northern hemisphere in Sweden or something long before fruits were shipped up there. Mango is a fruit that has never been shipped up there. So you don't know what the word mango is in Sweden at that time. The same thing if I've lived in the middle of the desert in Saudi Arabia and someone is telling me about nuanced descriptions of different types of snow and different types of ice and different types of freezing water at different temperatures. This locution is not part of the Arabs' locution, especially the Arabs who lived in the middle of a desert. It is part of the locution of people who live in the northern hemisphere. Now, granted, these are different languages in this case, but imagine even if they were the same language, they wouldn't have the detailed terminology. So, for example, today, Arab Bedouins who tend to camels have a very, very rich lexicon of terms and words that refer to camels because they deal with them all the time. Whereas a person who is an Arab but a city dweller has no clue what these words refer to because they're irrelevant to his or her locution. So therefore, when two people are trying to communicate, by definition, they must use what's common to both of them. So if person A is from Iraq, person B is from Tunisia, they're both Arabs, they're both speaking the mother language of Arabic, but they have to resort to something common between them, and they're not necessarily speaking the full locution to each other. There is always an intersection they have to resort to. That's how we communicate. We communicate using the areas of intersection between parole A and parole B. That area is referred to as the common locution that we use for communication. I hope this is clear. This is the end of the terminology. From there on, everything is very simple. So now we move to the second diagram to illustrate a little bit regarding some characters that we know about, Ibrahim and Musa. So Ibrahim spoke some sort of language. We don't really know for sure which language. Some claim it was Akkadian, some claim it was Sumerian. We don't really know because the Quran never told us where and when exactly Ibrahim lived. But let's remember that he had some sort of language. The full language that was available to Ibrahim to learn is Ibrahim's long language. That was not his locution. The locution that he used to express concepts about monotheism, that is Abrahamic locution. So it is a subset of the full language. Just like in the case of person A and person B, they use only a subset of the full language. So we say they're speaking Arabic, yes, but it doesn't mean their locution is the same. It doesn't mean the understanding of specific terms is the same across both A and B. I hope this makes sense. So in the case of Musa, Musa grew up in Misr, and we are sure that he had his own language, mother tongue, so to speak. Now, because he lived in Misr within a specific community, he had his own locution. So the locution of Musa was partly based on the locution of Ibrahim, who was before him, because we know that Musa referred to monotheism, referred to similar concepts as in the Abrahamic locution. But Musa also had his own unique locution, as we demonstrated in the video that talks about hieroglyphics in the Quran. So Musa was described using some terminology from the hieroglyphic language cast into the Arabic language. I never said that the word atawakka'u is Egyptian. I never said that. I said the Arabic language atawakka'u is described using a character in the hieroglyphic language. So people who don't understand sometimes accuse us of the wrong things because of their ignorance. We just hope that they learn. Hopefully they're not misleading others in the process of their ignorance and their false claims. So therefore we focus now, the concept of locution for Musa includes a subset of his mother tongue. Now, let me ask a question. Did Musa and Harun have the same language? Yes. Did they use exactly the same locution? No, they did not. And you know that within the same family, sometimes we use a shared locution, but if one person from this family migrates to another country and lives there for 5 years, 10 years, they bring back, when they come back, new terms cast into the same mother tongue, but now outside of that family's locution. I hope that makes sense. So between me and my neighbor, we speak the same Arabic, for example, but we have our own household locution. With my wife or with my daughter or with my son, I may speak inside talk, inside speech that my neighbor may not understand. That is our locution. It is cast within the Arabic language, but it doesn't mean that every Arab should understand it. I hope this makes perfect sense by now, because the difference between locution and language is extremely important. Now we move to the Quranic stories. What does the Quran say about locution? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, as we will see in full details, that the main language was Arabic for the Quran, so it is cast into Arabic. It doesn't mean every Arab will understand it. It doesn't mean it has no locutions that was brought in and Arabized from the Abrahamic locution. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us the Quranic stories include specific locutions of the characters about whom these stories are. We will see in full details when we discuss Ayah 14:4. And the same is true about Musa. So even though Musa spoke a different language natively, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought some terms and cast them into Arabic and included them as part of the locution in the stories about Musa. We will see more details inshallah. So the Quranic stories about Ibrahim included some locution. Notice this cloud right here, the Abrahamic locution, spills outside of Arabic. Why? Because there are some words that were Arabized from the Abrahamic locution. Every serious scholar knows that the Quranic terms and expressions are not 100% part of the Arabic language. They all know that some words have been quote-unquote Arabized and therefore became part of the Quranic Arabic. It doesn't mean the Quran is exclusively Arabic. We will give some terms and some examples in just a few seconds. So now we talk about two different stories, the Quranic stories about Ibrahim and the Quranic stories about Musa. And again, they have something in common. You see this area right here of intersection. So there are some common terms. So for example, Musa used the word Rabbi, used the word Zalimin, and so on and so forth. Those words came from the Abrahamic locution. Were they exactly the same words that Musa used in his life from the Egyptian language? We don't know. The Quran cast them into an equivalent Arabic. And the same for Ibrahim. We don't know if the word Zalimin was actually ever pronounced by Ibrahim. It could be an equivalent word that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cast into Arabic, but it is still part of the Abrahamic locution. I hope this makes sense. So the locutions of these different people were originally not necessarily the same words as in Arabic, But these terms and words were cast into Arabic, were Arabized, then they became part of the language of the Quran. Still, they're identifying marks to the original source of such terms. So now we move to some examples. Let's look at a very practical example, the word Ya Abati, Ya Abati, a very curious example, very beautiful, simple example. We will all be able to see it. I did not translate these verses because I wanted you to see the helicopter view, and you will immediately get the issue. So the concept of using locution in the Quran, the concept of the word Ya Abati refers to, O Father. This is the general understanding of that word, even though I personally have some reservations on this translation, and we will discuss it later, inshallah, when we discuss the story of Ibrahim, the story of Musa, and even the story of Yusuf. But for now, let's stick to, O Father, my Father. So the first person in the Quran who used this word, Ya Abati, when I say the first, I mean historically. Ibrahim came before Yusuf, Yusuf came before Musa, Musa came before other people such as Isa, and so on. So when I say the first, I mean historically, not necessarily the first in the sequence in the Quran. The first person historically who used that word within the Quran is Ibrahim. In Surah Maryam, it's used 4 times. As you see, the ayat numbers are clearly marked in here. It's talking about Ibrahim. He's using Ya Abati. And the usage of these 4 terms in sequence like this is by itself indicating that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is drawing our attention. Pay attention, there's something going on in here. Why is the same word used 4 times in a sequence such as this? Because Allah is teaching us this is part of how Ibrahim spoke, part of his parole, part of his locution. I hope this makes sense. Now we're gonna see it used again in Surah As-Saffat 37 when he is discussing some things with his son Ishaq, as we said, and there's a whole segment about who was the person who was almost slaughtered by Ibrahim, and we proved that it was Ishaq. He uses the same word, Ishaq uses the same word, Ya Abati. That means Ishaq learned it from Ibrahim. This is what this ayah is teaching us. So Ibrahim used it with his father, and then used it with his own son Ishaq, and then Ishaq in his speech to Ibrahim, he used it again. قَالَ يَا أَبَتِ افْعَلْ مَا تُؤْمَرُ. Do as you are commanded, as we have described in that video. Now later on, Yusuf used it again. He used it first with his father. إِذْ قَالَ يُوسُفُ لِأَبِيهِ يَا أَبَتِ. Ya Abati, my father. Ya Abati, the same word. And incidentally, when we look at the interpretations of the Quran, the tafsir of the Quran, the books of tafsir had a struggle to really come up with the etymology of this expression, Ya Abati. So some of them said it comes from Ya Abata, some of them said Ya Abati with a Ya, but then the Ya is cut off, and some people gave different opinions, and many of them struggled with the real etymology of that word. Why? Because it was not part of the Arabs' locution. It was never used by the Arabs from the Quran, and the proof is not a single book of tafsir, not a single grammarian or linguist came up with evidence that says this is how such and such poet used it before the Quran, and this is exactly what it means. None. So it is not Arabic. It is a locution that was Arabized. It was brought from Ibrahim. It was taught through Yaqub and then to Yusuf. Yusuf used it with his own father. And then later on, Yusuf used it with his father again to prove to us that Yaqub is actually the one who came to Misr when ayah 100 is discussing how Yusuf talked to his father again, Ya Abati. So now we have a pattern. The pattern is Ibrahim used that locution, he taught it to other people taught it to other people, and so on and so forth, until eventually in Surah Al-Qasas, we hear a woman who would eventually become Musa's wife talk to her own father using the word Ya Abati. And this is the hint, this is the clear indication from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that this woman and this community, including her father, are followers of Ibrahim. Not only followers of Ibrahim, but perhaps direct descendants of Ibrahim. Therefore, they learned this language within the locution of the community that spoke the Abrahamic locution. So it's a proof that even though there are probably thousands of years between Musa and Ibrahim, that locution was carried forward. So this locution was also carried forward in the Quran. It's a very simple concept. It's a very elegant concept. It's a very provable concept. You can see it in front of your eyes. This woman had nothing to do with the original Ibrahim, and yet she spoke the exact locution as Ibrahim. This is the role of such a word. It's giving us additional semantics, additional information, without Allah having to spell it out explicitly. And this is the style of the Quran. Makes you think, makes you reflect. People who are really not thinking, who are not interested in using their intellect, are not going to engage the Quran correctly. But when you see such a marking very clearly, you understand that this family where Musa went was a family of believers in the style of monotheism. Now, is this enough? Is this one janah? Yes, it is one janah. In the very next ayah, Allah gives us the second janah, the second evidence, because the man, the father of this woman, says, "Satajiduni insha'Allahu min as-salihin." Again, this is Abrahamic locution. So Allah is confirming what we suspected, that Ya Abati is one link to the Abrahamic locution, and the man himself was a monotheist in the style of Ibrahim. I hope this is clear. This is one beautiful, elegant example of how Abrahamic locution is used for identification purposes and other purposes that we will see within the Quran. Now we move to direct Quranic evidence that Lissān is not language. Lissān is not language, as some people who are attacking this channel claim. And by the way, some of the books of interpretation, tafsir, and translation claim. So I don't blame the people who are attacking this channel. They just don't know. They're really not practicing their intellect to the adequate level. They're being negligent, basically. And they're parroting what they have learned from somewhere else. Let's see if the Quran agree with what they claim, that Lissān equal language. We look at the story of Musa and Harun. So in the Surah Al-Qasas 28, Musa is invited by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, instructed to become a messenger to go to Fir'aun. So Musa requests that his own brother Harun be the person who accompanies him on that mission. So Musa says, وَأَخِي هَارُونَ هُوَ أَفْصَحُ مِنِّي لِسَانًا فَأَرْسِلْهُ مَعِيَ رِدْ أَنْ يُصَدِّقُنِي إِنِّي أَخَافُ أَنْ يُكَذِّبُونَ. So we will see the interpretation and the translation from the common translation books. Not that I approve of them, I'm just showing you that they all agreed that there is some sort of comparison between Lissān of Musa and Lissān of Harun. And they had clearly two different Lissān. Pay attention. So Sahih International translates it as more fluent to me than me in tongue. Pickthall, more eloquent than me in speech. Yusuf Ali, more eloquent in speech. Shakir, more eloquent of tongue. Again, the same thing. There's a distinction between the Lissān of Musa and Lissān of Harun. One is more eloquent. Is that referring to the language? No, they spoke the same language. They grew up within the same household. They grew up within the same family. Provably, in the Quran, they spoke to each other all the time. Musa asked for Harun specifically because he's more eloquent. So, did Musa speak a different language? Of course not. He spoke the same language. Now, what is this referring to? What is this ayah referring to? It is referring to the locution of Harun is more eloquent. Very obvious. It is definitely not referring to a different language. So now we go to another example. لُعِنَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا مِنْ بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ عَلَى لِسَانِ دَاوُودَ وَعِيسَى بْنِ مَرْيَمَ. The rejectors among Bani Israel were cursed in the Lissān of Dawood and Isa ibn Maryam. Pay attention that a single Lissān is used to describe both of them, Dawood and Isa ibn Maryam. Now, did Dawood and Isa ibn Maryam have the same language? Did they even live in the same geography or the same era? The Quran never gives us this information. To the opposite, everything else that we know about Dawood and Isa is they lived at least 1,000 years or maybe 500 years apart. So therefore, did they have the same language? one Lissān, one language? The answer is obviously no. They did not have one language. And yet the Quran says one Lissān. It did not say Lissānay Dawood wa Isa ibn Maryam, the two tongues of Dawood and Isa ibn Maryam. It says one, single Lissān. And yes, in Arabic somebody can stretch it, but the Quran with its precision could have said Lissānay to distinguish between them. And yet it gave us a clear indication. It used one Lissān. Now, in the past, in the segment about Allahumma, I said Allahumma was used by Isa. It does not mean that Allahumma must be also used by Dawood. As long as it's part of the same locution, we will see later what Dawood used as a curse against the rejectors of Bani Israel. It's part of the same locution. So what did they have in common, meaning one Lissān? They had the Abrahamic locution. Both of them learned the Abrahamic style of expression, the Abrahamic locution. This is the obvious answer, the inevitable answer. Unless you have an alternate explanation, which you're welcome to bring it forth, inshallah, you will see that this is clear evidence that Lissān does not refer to language. Now, somebody will ask, well, what about Ayah 14:4? You presented it in a way that does not make sense. Let's analyze it. Let's review how we present it, and you will see it makes absolutely perfect sense. People have attacked it because they did not give themselves the opportunity to learn. The typical interpretation, which is wrong about this ayah, is never have we sent a messenger except in the language of his own people to clarify to them. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا مِن رَسُولٍ إِلَّا بِلِسَانِ قَوْمِهِ لِيُبَيِّنَ لَهُمْ فَيُضِلُّ اللَّهُ مَن يَشَاءُ وَيَهْدِي مَن يَشَاءُ. Allah misguides whoever He wants and guides whoever wants, and Allah is the unassailable, the source of linguistic discernment. Now we ask a fundamental question. Is this translation correct? Well, as we said in that segment that I referred to, YT91, there is the concept of the principle of relevance. Everything Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us should not be trite, should not be hackneyed, should not be common information. We didn't learn anything. That does not ascribe to Allah His due reverence. Allah's words are very precious, and therefore when Allah gives us something, some information, an ayah, a sign, we're learning something from it. So what would we learn if the interpretation is every messenger was sent in the language of his own people? Well, of course he would be sent in the language of his own people. Is he supposed to speak a foreign language to them? Of course not. This is a trite type of information, trivial, hackneyed, not really new knowledge, not really worthy of the signs, the ayat of the Quran. The other problem is, if this is applied to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, didn't the Arabs already know that this is their own language? Why would the Quran need to remind them that, hey, this is your language? Why? What is there that they wouldn't figure it out? If I'm speaking English now, anybody who's trained to listen to English would immediately recognize this is English. Okay, my accent is broken, that's fine. But at least they would recognize that it is English. So the question is, why would the Quran tell them that this is their own language? And yet, why did they not understand and still disagree about the Quran? There must be something additional the Quran is poking them about. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling them, you claim this is your language, fine. Okay, why don't you understand it? We will see. We will see the full evidence of the answer to that question. Now, the third major problem is, if Lissān is language, does this ayah mean, when it says لِيُبَيِّنَ لَهُمْ, that means in order to clarify to them, or in order to expose to them, to show them, that means this is the purpose of this Lissān, or sending this Rasul in the Lissān, sending this messenger in that so-called language. Okay, well that means that Rasul is sent to those people, to the Arabs. Is that what this ayah is saying? Of course not. It cannot be, because in many other places on the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that this book and Muhammad as a messenger was sent to all mankind. So therefore, we have three major problems. Is that it? No, there is a much more significant problem. The significant problem with the traditionalist interpretation and the people who are attacking this channel based on their claim that Lissān means Arabic language, okay, there is a much bigger problem. The problem is, are the jinns Arabs? I mean it. This is a very serious question. You see, if you look at this ayah 14:4 and you take the typical wrong interpretation that Lissān is language, now we have a problem when we read in Surah Al-Jinn and Surah Al-Ahqaf that Al-Jinn, in their traditional interpretation, remember, are separate creatures other than human beings. So Al-Jinn came and listened to the Quran. Now I'm going to go with them on both interpretations. So Lissān, language, as they said, Jinn is a separate creature, separate from human beings. Let's assume that both of these things are right and see where that leads us. Surah Al-Ahqaf tells us Al-Jinn came hearing the Quran, and when they attended the session where the Quran is being recited, they said, listen, we're going to learn, we're going to listen. That means we're going to understand. And then when they're done, they went back to their community and said, we have heard a book, a scripture that was revealed after Musa, etc., etc., and it guides to the truth, and ila tariqin mustaqim. That's their language. Okay, fine. So that means they understood the Quran in its original language from Muhammad, because it's saying, sarafna ilayka, we sent toward you. Did this jinn listen to the Quran in Arabic or not? Clearly in Arabic. Very good. Another ayah, just to confirm, we need the second wing. Surah Al-Jinn. The jinn said, Inna sami'na Qur'ānan ajaban. We heard of a Quran that is truly amazing. Yahdi ila rushd. It guides to the right way of seeking guidance toward Allah. فآمنا. We believed in it. وَلَن نُشْرِكَ بِرَبِّنَا أَحَدًا. We're not going to associate with our Lord anyone else. So clearly they listened, they understood, and they accepted the message, the truth. That means they understood Arabic. No way to deny this fact. Now we go back to 14:4. This messenger, Muhammad, was sent in the language of his community. Does this say the jinn were his community? According to their own interpretation, the jinn is a separate creature. According to their interpretation, the jinn now speaks Arabic. Does that work? How does that work? You say, well, they're not part of his community and they understand Arabic. That means this ayah is wrong because it says bilisani qawmihi. So if you say the jinn are separate creatures, that means the jinn are exclusively Arabs because they speak Arabic, and you tell us Arabic is the language of the Arabs. So that means the jinn are Arabs, exclusively Arabs. And Muhammad was sent to two different types of creatures: humans, who is Arabs, and jinns, who are Arabs. Well, what about jinns who are not Arabs? Do you think Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that Muhammad was sent only to the Arabs? Major problems with their interpretations, all sorts of holes in their logic, and yet they don't think. They insist that Muhammad was sent in the language of the Arabs. To whom? To his people, the Arabs. Well, that means he's not sent to the non-Arabs, people who don't speak that language, as you say. Of course, these are gaps in their logic. The more important question, was Muhammad part of his own community of jinn? Really? I mean, think. It's right there in front of you. You can read all of these details and reach your own conclusion. So as you see, we have major problems with the traditional interpretation. And that's why we came up with a different interpretation and translation. The real interpretation as we see it, based on the evidence, based on everything I've presented so far, and a lot more coming throughout the rest of the segment. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا مِن رَسُولٍ إِلَّا بِلِسَانِ قَوْمِهِ لِيُبَيِّنَ لَهُمْ means never we have sent in this Quran about a messenger except in the locution of his own people. Lissān, as I demonstrated, Lissān is different than language. So that Allah exposes to them. And I added the word Allah. Yes, and you will see why. And also I added in this Quran, and you will see why. And then Allah misguides whom He wills and guides whoever wills to be guided, meaning chooses to be guided. And He, Allah, is the unassailable, the source of linguistic discernment. Perfect. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, Al-Hakim, pay attention, I'm using very specific terminology. Don't interpret it according to your whims and fancy. Don't interpret it according to how you choose to interpret it. Refer to the hukum, the linguistic discernment that Allah deposited in the Quran. This is the mistake they made. Those who are attacking this channel based on our interpretation being wrong, claiming that it's wrong, really are not paying attention to anything in the Quran. Now, why in the Quran and why Allah exposes to them are part of our translation and interpretation. Well, first of all, pay attention to the word Rasul. Rasul. We define the word Rasul as someone who does not make up his own speech, does not use his own language to make his own claims. A Rasul brings a very specific message in a scripture. We defined it, the Quran clearly defined it. Refer to a prior segment that talks about the definition of Rasul versus the definition of Nabi, and I will put a link to it. Therefore, when a Rasul exposes the truth to his community, it is exclusively in the scripture with which he was sent. A Rasul does not speak his own language anyway. He speaks the language or the locution of the scripture he was given, and he delivers that message exclusively. That's the mission of a Rasul. A Nabi, on the other hand, is a different story. Now, does this ayah talk about Rasul or Nabi? It's talking about Rasul exclusively. So it is not his personal language that matters in here. It is the Lissān of his people that would make sense for them to understand this exposure to which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is exposing them. So therefore, it's the locution of the recipients. So who are the recipients in here? People who understand the Abrahamic locution. Is that exclusive to them? No. This is why this ayah is telling us, pay attention. If you don't understand the Abrahamic locution, which we used in the Quranic stories, work on it. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us in other places that He deposited the information about hukum, the linguistic discernment, throughout the Quran. So if we take this principle and apply it, now we can extract the Abrahamic locution, and then all of a sudden the Quran lights up. It illuminates. It becomes very clear as to what these stories and these terms and expressions mean. So therefore, for Muhammad, it was to expose to them what is exclusively in the Quran. That's why we said in this Quran, because this is the subject and the context of this ayah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us in this Quran. So never have we sent about, and we explained about min means sometimes about, and we clearly demonstrated this, that the Quran uses it in that way. So it's very legitimate. We're not making it up. It doesn't matter if the Arabs think that or not. It is the Quran and its hukum that matters. So therefore Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us about these messengers that we sent you. Their stories are in the locution of their people. Why? So that the Quran exposes to those people, well, yeah, the remnants of them that remained, the remnants of Bani Israel, the remnants of Ali Imran, the remnants of the people of Musa, the remnants of the people of Ibrāhīm. Did they exist at the time of Muhammad ﷺ? Yes, they did, and you all know it. So therefore, this ayah makes perfect sense in the way we interpreted it. Is that it? No. If you go to Surah An-Nahl, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us additional details, additional evidence. So in ayah 1636, it starts, it's a long paragraph. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in a long paragraph, وَلَقَدْ بَعَثْنَا فِي كُلِّ أُمَّةٍ رَسُولًا. And then it continues with a bunch of parenthetical sentences that explain additional detail, and then picks up again, لِيُبَيِّنَ لَهُمْ, so that this Rasul will expose to them, will show them, will illustrate to them, الَّذِي يَخْتَلِفُونَ فِيهِ, those things about which they disagreed. So therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this paragraph, starting with ayah 36, ending with ayah 39, is telling us that the Rasul is sent in every ummah. We will talk about ummah later, to expose to them. To expose to them what? To expose to them things about things they disagreed about. Well, if they disagreed about them, that means they had heard about the source of disagreement first, which means the prior messages of earlier messengers. Very clear. Therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is bringing clarification to them after they have misunderstood prior messages. Very clear. So he's talking to them about things with which they are familiar. In other words, it must include the locution of the original stories. It's very obvious right there in front of us. In Ayah 43, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us another indication. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا مِن قَبْلِكَ إِلَّا رِجَالًا نُوحِي إِلَيْهِمْ فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. We have translated this ayah before in part 1 of the series Why No Quranic Stories Equal No Quran, and there is even a mini segment about it. But this ayah says, we have sent before you only rijal, and we said rijal does not mean men, it means anybody who walks. As in Surah Al-Hajj, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells Ibrāhīm, وَأَذِّن فِي النَّاسِ بِالْحَجِّ يَأْتُوكَ رِجَالًا, and when you call toward Hajj, they come to you walking or riding, etc., etc. Walking includes both men and women. Rijalan in here includes both men and women. So we had sent these messengers, arsalna, bil-bayinat, with the clear evidence toward what? Toward what they already know. People who receive these messages must know something already. And it continues, وَأَنزَلْنَا إِلَيْكَ الذِّكْرَ. الذِّكْرَ refers to what? Refers to the Quran, or the content of the Quran, at least according to our definition, the Quranic stories and parables. But in the traditionalist interpretation, it's the whole Quran. Fine, al-dhikr is the whole Quran. Al-dhikr was given to you to expose to people. So therefore, the messenger in this ayah 14:4 is not talking about his own language, his own speech, his own explanations. يُبَيِّنَ لَهُمْ is about the Quran in this case. I hope it's very clear. Now, the third evidence, وَمَا أَنزَلْنَا عَلَيْكَ الْكِتَابَ إِلَّا لِتُبَيِّنَ لَهُمْ. Again, the same style, the same expression, تُبَيِّنَ لَهُمْ, يُبَيِّنَ لَهُمْ. Based on what? Based on Al-Kitab, the scripture. So when a Rasul is exposing them or showing them or clarifying to them, he's not making it up. He's basing it on the message to clarify any disagreement they may have, using al-dhikr and using al-kitab. Very obvious. Therefore, when we said in this Quran, it makes perfect sense. It is consistent with the rest of the Quran. We're not making it up. Those who don't want to explain this detail in the Quran are the ones making it up. They're the ones who are accusing Rasul, messengers, of making up their own speech. Now here's the problem with this. If you claim that a Rasul exposes to them, to the audience, outside the scripture, you are claiming that the Rasul made separate claims aside from the Quran. And therefore, why do you have a Quran alone YouTube channel in the first place, Habibi? Because you're making the same claim as those who want to overimpose the hadith on top of the Quran. Why do you have a Quran alone channel? You've just invalidated your whole channel. Shut it down. It's more dignified and honorable for you. You have just proven your own inconsistencies and your own lack of faith in the Quran. In other words, only Allah exposes to people. Through the Rasul, yes. Through the scripture, exclusively. Exclusively. Otherwise, that means the hadith is on equal footings with the Quran. If you believe this, that means your whole channel is useless. So I hope it's really clear. Never have we sent in this Quran about a messenger stories, meaning stories about the messengers, except in the locution of his own people, so that Allah exposes to them, not the messenger. Now you say, well, يُبَيِّنَ لَهُمْ is referring to an absent pronoun, يُبَيِّن, the subject of the verb يُبَيِّن, and it must come before it. Yes, that's according to the rules of the Arab grammarians and the Arab poets, not according to the Quran. Let's look at this issue. So the issue is, and this is a little technical, please bear with me. It's very important that we answer this question for the sake of those who know a little bit of Arabic and think they can apply it to the Quran. The amateurs who are trying to play the role of people who do tafsir, unfortunately, there are some out there, and they claim they are Quran alone type of YouTube channels. Let's talk about this so that we can close this issue once and for all. So the question is, what is the pronoun for لِيُبَيِّنَ لَهُمْ? Shouldn't it have come before? In other words, الرسول يبين لهم وما أرسلنا من رسول إلا بلسان قومه ليبين لهم. That means رسول يبين لهم. Is that true? Is that always the case in the Quran? So the question is, why is the subject of يبين لهم delayed after the verb? You said, Dr. Hani, you said, so that Allah exposes to them. And the word Allah only comes after this verb. Yes, that's part of the style of the Quran. Let's see 4 examples, not just one, 4 different examples. First example from Surah Al-Ahqaf, starting with ayah 46:7. We're going to see a noun that is mentioned after a pronoun referring to it is used. So the very first sentence, وَإِذَا تُتْلَى عَلَيْهِمْ, if the signs are recited upon them, عَلَيْهِمْ, this is the pronoun for them. We don't know who them is yet, and yet the Quran continues, بَيِّنَاتٍ, very clear evidence, very clear exposing. Those who reject say, those who reject are him, them. So them as a pronoun was used first and then was defined. The referent for it, the referent for this pronoun came after the pronoun was first used. I hope this makes sense. It's clear right there in front of you. In the interest of preserving time, I'm not going to go through every detail, but this whole paragraph is talking about kitab, هذا kitab. This is a scripture. This is a book. Yes, it is described first in here as the truth, but we're not told what this truth is referring to. So al-haq is a descriptor of something, but we're not told what that something is. In other words, the referent is not given to us. And count, there is 1 reference to it, 2nd reference, 3rd reference, 4th reference right here, 5, 6, 7 right here, 8, 9, 10, and then the book Kitab appears, referring to the Kitab from our beloved Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, confirming a locution that belongs to the Arabic. Yes, makes perfect sense. But the word Kitab, which is a referent for all of these things in magenta, was not mentioned until way later. That's part of the eloquence of the Quran. It makes you anticipate. What is he talking about? What is he talking about? And you keep your attention and you stay with it. If you're not paying attention, you lost it. That's part of the style of the Quran. You have to get used to it. It is not for 4th graders. It is not for someone who has taken Arabic 101 and now is playing the role of someone who does tafsir. It is really sad to watch the ignorance that is being spewed on channels that claim to be Quran alone. Here's another example. فَأَوْجَسَ فِي نَفْسِهِ خِيفَةً مُوسَى. So the verb أَوْجَسَ, he harbored in his self, in his nafs, some fear. His, فِي نَفْسِهِ, his, right here, this pronoun, we're not told who that person is. The word Musa comes later on. So the referent, the noun to which this pronoun is referring, comes after the sentence. Again, that's part of the style of the Quran. Now, here's another example from Surah Yusuf, Surah 12, ayah 77. قالوا إن يسرق فقد سرق أخ له من قبل فأسرها يوسف في نفسه ولم يبدها لهم. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is reporting to us what they said, the brothers, the siblings. If he steals, then another brother of his has stolen before. So Yusuf, فَأَسَرَّهَا Yusuf, Yusuf kept it inside him. We're not told what it was. We're not. Linguistically, we can guess what it is. We can think, we can reflect, but the Quran grammatically did not give us the noun referring to ha, this pronoun, ha, it. Before it uses ha, it. It repeats it again. وَلَمْ يُبْدِهَا لَهُمْ. He did not disclose it to them. So what is it? It comes later. قَالَ أَنْتُمْ شَرٌّ مَكَانًا وَاللَّهُ أَعْلَمُ بِمَا تَصِفُونَ. He said in his own self, deep inside, within the secret of his self, he muttered these things to himself. He said, you are in a worse place, and Allah knows better what you describe. Allah shall disclose that which you describe erroneously. Therefore, here we learn a huge clue about Yusuf. Yusuf said this internally without expressing it to his siblings. I hope you got this hint. We will talk more about this when we talk about Surah Yusuf, but this is the proof right here. The Quran uses it, ha, this pronoun, and only discloses it later in the sentence. So as you see, this style right here, which is using the pronoun for لِيُبَيِّنَ لَهُمْ, in this case the subject, who shall expose to them, and that was Allah, only came in the ayah afterwards. فَيُضِلُّ اللَّهُ مَن يَشَاءُ. Allah is the one who exposes. As a matter of fact, if you trace يُبَيِّنَ لَهُمْ, it's almost exclusively used for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if you're familiar with the Quran, this is no challenge whatsoever, and that's why we said Allah exposes to them. Allah exposes to them. Therefore, this ayah, as we translated it back 2 years ago in YT91, stands correct as we demonstrated right here. So now we move to a slightly different issue, which is what's the difference between the Quranic Arabic versus language of the Arabs. We need more details on this. So the Quran says about itself, وَهَذَا لِسَانٌ عَرَبِيٌّ مُبِينٌ. Remember in the diagrams I just showed you a little earlier, there's the big thing, which is the language, and there's the locution. There's also a distinction to be made. The words and the terms of the Quran do not span every possible root in the Arabic language. In other words, the language the Quran relied on, the subset of the Arabic language, is not the full Arabic language. There are many terms and words that are part of the Arabic language, but the Quran never used, such as the verb or the root shaja'a, from which we find the word shuja', courageous. That word never occurs in the Quran, and yet it's part of Arabic. So we have many different words that are part of Arabic that the Quran never used. That means the Quran was poured into a bigger container. The bigger container is Arabic, but the Quran does not span everything in the language of Arabic. As we said earlier, it's not the language of the Arabs, because the Arabs were so many different factions and tribes and geographies, and over time they spoke slightly different languages. All of them referred to them as Arabic, but not necessarily exactly the same language. So they had multiple languages. So it is wrong to say Arabic is the language of the Arabs. The correct thing to say is that the Arabs refer to themselves as Arabs because they used one form or another of the Arabic language. I hope this is clear. This is what this ayah means. وَهَذَا لِسَانٌ عَرَبِيٌّ مُبِينٌ. Yes, it is an Arabic locution, meaning a locution that is cast into Arabic. The locution came from Ibrahim. The locution came from Misr, from Ali Imran, as we saw in the story of Isa, from different people, and it was cast into Arabic as a language, as a container. It doesn't mean all the Arabs understood the locution itself. The imagery, the metaphors, the idioms, and the expressions, all of these things came from the locution. They were cast into terms that are Arabic. The person who is familiar with the Arabic language would listen to it and say, yeah, I recognize this is Arabic. Just like as an English person today, if you read to him a book of chemistry or a book of philosophy in English, the English-speaking person would recognize this is English. It doesn't mean they understand it. It doesn't mean it's his locution. The locution of the communities of practice of chemistry or the community of practice of philosophy is different than the locution of the common English-speaking person. It's very simple. So this is what's saying. This Lissān that the Quran uses, which is the Abrahamic locution, we will demonstrate it, is cast into the Arabic terminology. Now we're going to deal with a very touchy subject. This is a major disclosure. This is a major irritant for some people. They will have significant existential crisis. So I hope you're patient and listen to it to the end, and you will see the validity of what we're saying. The concept of A'rab was used in the Quran. The concept of A'rab. So what are the A'rab? They told us A'rab, that means desert dwellers, or basically Bedouins. Is that true? The answer is absolutely not, and we're going to demonstrate that it's not. We're also going to explain why the people who did the books of tafsir, who wrote the books of tafsir, not necessarily the people whose names are on the books of tafsir, why those writers changed the meaning of the word A'rab to refer to it as Bedouins, whereas the Quran is very clear about whom it's talking, and we're going to see it. So the Quran is telling us قالت الأعراب آمنا قل لم تؤمنوا ولكن قولوا أسلمنا. So here what's going on? The Arabs, Arabic speakers, as we shall see, the Arabic speakers say, we have believed. They're using the word آمنا. They're using their own word, آمنا, Arabic word. The Quran is telling them, no, don't use that word. Don't use that word. Say, we have submitted. Aslamna, it's teaching them the correct locution of the Quran. This proves that the basic words of amana and aslama, the A'rab did not understand it. Is that enough? No, we're going to see a lot more. This ayah from Surah Al-Fath 48:16 instructs our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam, قُلْ لِلْمُخَلَّفِينَ مِنَ الْأَعْرَابِ سَتُدْعَوْنَ إِلَىٰ قَوْمٍ أُولِي بَأْسٍ شَدِيدٍ etc. etc. Say to those who remained behind of the Arabic speakers, some of them who remained behind on a campaign, our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam went out, they chose not to come with him. Tell them you will be called to face a people of great might, you will fight them, etc., or they will submit. And it continues with the rest of the ayah. The point is, it is telling Al-A'rab, were only the Bedouins the ones who were left behind and chose not to come with our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Obviously not. This cannot be that everybody in Medina came with him. We know for a fact, we know from other stories in the Quran, there were some people in Medina who stayed in Medina and did not come out with him on some of his campaigns. So Al-A'rab is not just the Bedouins. We know this for a fact from the Quran itself. Here's a more serious ayah. Al-A'rabu ashaddu kufran wa nifaqan وَأَجْدَرُ أَلَّا يَعْلَمُ حُدُودَ مَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ عَلَى رَسُولِهِ. Pay attention. عَلَى رَسُولِهِ, upon his messenger. The Arabic speakers are worse rejectors. أَشَدُّ كُفْرًا. Very clear, very plain, no ambiguity about this, no controversy. It's very obvious. And more hypocritical. أَشَدُّ كُفْرًا وَنِفَاقًا وَأَجْدَرُ أَلَّا يَعْلَمُ. And too competent in the wrong style to accept the evidence for the linguistic boundaries of what? Of what Allah has made accessible upon His Messenger. What did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make accessible upon His Messenger? The Quran. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, those who speak Arabic, their version of what they claim to be Arabic, and we're going to see more evidence, just be patient, they're too competent in their own wrong style to accept the linguistic evidence from the Quran. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala referred to them as أَشَدُّ كُفْرًا وَنِفَاقًا. They are worse rejectors and more hypocritical. Don't attach yourself to them. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues, وَاللَّهُ عَلِيمٌ حَكِيمٌ. Allah is the source of learning. Learn from Allah. And Allah is the source of linguistic discernment. Beautiful, perfect. It tells us the story fully. This shall become very clear as we move into the story of Shuayb, and we will understand exactly what's going on. So to those who claim Al-A'rab are the Bedouins, now we're going to present clear evidence from the Quran that the Quran used a different word. And don't tell me there is synonymy in the Quran, because you know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have chosen the same word. But in this case, in the case of Surah Yusuf, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us at the locution of Yusuf, وقد أحسن بي إذ أخرجني من السجن وجاء بكم من البدو, and he brought you from among the nomads, from among the Bedouins, from among the desert dwellers. So the word Bedu was used in the Quran. Why didn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala choose to use it in this case if, as the traditionalists claim, Al-A'rab means Bedouins? And Al-A'rab is used in about 8 or 9 different ayat. By the way, it's not just 1 or 2 ayah. So it's very clear Allah intended to tell us something, which is the Arabic speakers, especially those who are not immersed in really learning from the Quranic Arabic, are attached to what they think they know, and they become more rejectors. They become more hypocritical in their accusations against those who are toiling on the scripture. So therefore, Al-A'rab does not mean Bedouins, it means the Arabs who are Arabic speakers. So now we ask a kind of funny question, but very serious question. Why did the books of tafsir insist that Al-A'rab refer to the Bedouins, not the Arabs in general, or the Arabic speakers in general? If you think about it just a little bit, you're going to immediately learn exactly why. Is it possible that they tried to hide what Allah said about them? Of course. About their resistance to the Quranic Arabic, as we will see? Yes, of course. Is it possible that they wanted to justify their erroneous claim that the Quran was revealed in the language of Quraysh? Quraysh, by the way, the Umayyad who took over Islam after the assassination of Ali and moved the capital to Damascus. Remember this. The Umayyad are Quraysh. Is it possible that they wanted to justify their erroneous claim that the Quran is in their language and that they deserve to be the leaders of the Ummah? Of course. Politics, ethnic racism, supremacy, just as the Quran warned us, other communities of faith before the Quran did. More importantly, and perhaps more sinister justification, is it possible that they were maligning our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Maligning our beloved, how? Because the same books of tafsir and hadith and seerah told us that he learned Arabic from the Bedouins in his early youth. Think about this. Is it possible that they were telling us in the books of tafsir that they knew the language of the Quran more than someone who has learned from the Bedouins? Is it possible that this is why they stress that part of his life in the early years of his childhood, insisting to let us know that he learned out there, he learned from the Bedouins, and at the same time translating the word or interpreting the word A'rab as Bedouins? As I said at the beginning, these segments include a lot of disclosures that are annoying to some people, and that will create existential crisis for others. I invite my brothers and sisters who have listened so far to be patient, to think, to reflect. Not everything we received was in the best interest of us and in fairness to our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I'm showing you right in front of your eyes. So now we ask, did the 7th century Arabs understand the Quran? I'm going to let the Quran answer this question. I'm not going to make it up. Ayah 478. أينما تكونوا يدرككم الموت ولو كنتم في بروج مشيدة وإن تصبهم حسنة يقولوا هذه من عند الله وإن تصبهم سيئة يقولوا هذه من عندك قل كل من عند الله فما لهؤلاء القوم لا يكادون يفقهون حديثا. I will skip over the part that is not highlighted and I will read only the highlighted part. What is the matter with these communities that they don't come close to understand the discourse? فما لهؤلاء القوم لا يكادون يفقهون حديثا. They're not even close to understand the hadith of the Quran. Of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about his own hadith. فبأي حديث بعد الله وآياته يؤمنون. Allah describes the Quran as a hadith. That's the word hadith, not what they told us. Human narrations for 6 or 7 generations orally and then eventually documented is the hadith. The Quran tells us the hadith is the Quran itself. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is scandalizing them. What is wrong with these people? They can barely, not even come close to understand the Quran. Here's another one that we've used in YT91. And again, it's from that book that I will show you in a few minutes. وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمُ اسْجُدُوا لِلرَّحْمَنِ قَالُوا وَمَا الرَّحْمَنِ. And when it is said to them to prostrate in submission to Ar-Rahman, they said, what is Ar-Rahman? And then they continue, shall we prostrate to what you command us? Command us. أَنَسْجُدُ لِمَا تَأْمُرُنَا. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that their objection is not to the actual word. They did not understand the word. Their objection is to take the meaning from Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. وَزَادَهُمْ نُفُورًا. And it only increased them in repulsion. Remember this, because repulsion is what we saw over the last 1200 years. The further and further they pushed the Muslims away from the true understanding of the Quran. So, sorry, I had to change location a little bit due to some challenges with the logistics. So we had to go to our backup location. I apologize for the way it looks, but we're going to continue with what we can do. So, the Quranic words that are not part of the Arabs' lexicon. In other words, these are part of the Quran, but the Arabs did not understand what they are or did not recognize that these are words that are part of their language, so to speak. Some examples include haytalak from ayah 12:23 from Surah Yusuf, وَيْكَأَنَّ from Surah 28, Surah Al-Qasas, لَنَسْفَعًا written this way. And again, this is not Arabic. There is no Arabic equivalent in the Arabic lexicon, so to speak. لَا يَكُونًا, this is from Surah Yusuf. This word right here is very important to recognize what it is. As-samawat, as-samawat. It's pronounced with a long a. This word is not Arabic. This is not part of any Arabic lexicon. As-samawat with a fatha on the meme, not a alif on the meme like you see in here. This word right here, that is Arabic. Unfortunately, that's not part of the Quran at all. It doesn't ever show up in the Quran anywhere. This word right here is not part of the dictionary. So some people who are attacking the channel are saying as-samawat, the word that's used in the Quran, really means the heavens. That's all it means. And the answer is no. This word probably means the heavens. But this word is a Quranic, purely Quranic word, an introduction by the Quran into the Arabic language. Check it out, verify it. Don't take my word for it. Go check it out for yourself. This word right here means the layers of understanding. And therefore, when as-samawat wal-ard, that means the layers of understanding that are attached to al-ard, the scripture. It is perfect sense. Therefore, this is one of the words that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala introduced to the Arabic language, to the Arabs, that was not originally part of their language. Another word, umniyatihi. Again, we discussed this at length. Umniyatihi is a Quranic word. Umniyatihi, without the shadda on the ya. Umniyatihi, that's Arabic. That's Arabic. It is one ya in here. But umniyatihi, that's not Arabic. This is a concatenated word, and we talked about this in an earlier video on this channel. Yabna umma, that's another word. Yabna umma, especially with a fatha on the meme at the end from ayah 2094, pronounced yabna umma, not yabna ummi. Yabna ummi is an Arabic word. Yes, this is probably something the Arabs can recognize. But yabna umma, it is not Arabic at all. As a matter of fact, combining it like this, and in another location where the same story, the same scene is being reported, Yabna Umma with two words, proves that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to recognize that some words are concatenated. This word happens to be concatenated from another two words. Very strange words, Yabna Umma. And therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching us. This is how the Quran acts as software to broaden the Arabic language. So another word is salsabil. We've seen this before from ayah 76:18. The word Allahumma has no etymology in Arabic. Don't believe people who tell you that it means Ya Allah. It does not. There is absolutely no justification, no morphology, no etymology for this word. It is not part of the Arabic lexicon, period. It was Arabized from some other source. This is referred to in 5 different ayat, among them Ayah 10:10. The word Jahannam, the very famous word Jahannam, has no etymology in Arabic. It does not come from a known root. Some people try to make up things, but again, there is no equivalent morpheme that allows us to derive this word from a known root. And therefore, there are lots of examples. There are additionally some ayat, dozens of ayat, that violate the grammar rules, violate between double quotes, because these grammar rules are not the Quranic rules, but the Arab poets' rules, the rules that the Arab poets were used to. Rules such as the relationship between the masculine verb versus a feminine subject and vice versa, mixing sentient versus non-sentient pronouns, changing in the middle of a sentence from a person who's being addressed to the one speaking, that's called iltifat, and many variations that an Arab poet would not be caught dead saying. And the Quran uses these techniques to deliver extra value, extra semantic value. And therefore the Arabs, when they developed the grammar rules for Arabic based on the Quran, had all sorts of difficulties containing all the examples in the Quran. And in some cases, they came up with a justification saying, this word in here, this term is extraneous. This one should have been this, but it's probably, as a matter of fact, some grammarians had the audacity to say, this Quran made some mistakes, astaghfirullah. So again, the grammar rules of the Arab poets are not fully respected by the Quran. The Quran has its own rules. And then additionally, thousands of expressions, we're talking now about semantics and vocabulary, thousands of expressions and sentences and clauses that the Arabs did not use before the Quran. We had talked about this referring to the book Al-Mu'jiza, part 1 and 2 by Ahmad Bassam As-Sa'i. And I showed you this book before in YT91, so please refer back to the discussion in that segment about this book. So we need to remember that languages in general change over time. And I'm going to give you some examples from the English language. Very few examples, I'll let you read the rest. But there are some shocking examples as to how certain words changed in meaning. For example, the word nice used to mean stupid or foolish, but now it refers to friendly, pleasant, agreeable. The word awful used to mean worthy of awe, but now it is referring to dreadful, terrible, unpleasant. The word heartburn used to refer to jealousy and hatred, but now it's referring to the reflux of stomach acid that comes up, the pain that is caused by such a thing. The word clue now means a sign to unlock a mystery, and we use it quite a bit in the discussions on this channel. It used to be from this type of spelling, clue, which literally means a ball of yarn, and it is referring to someone going into a labyrinth and carrying that ball of yarn and sort of the string following him so that he or she could find their way out. Clue. That's the word, and that's how it was spelled. It was changed over time, and it became some sort of a sign or a hint to unlock a mystery, and so on. You can read the rest. One of the best examples that I've seen is the word doom. Doom used to refer to a law decision, decision by a judge, decision that is related to a legal issue. But now it refers to ruin or death or ill fortune. As you see, the words in every language change over time. So the question then becomes, how did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect the language of the Quran from suffering this type of change over time? Slippage of the semantics of the words. The answer is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala entrusted the Quranic stories to hold the fixed context which fixes the semantics of the words. This idea, by the way, you have never heard it from anybody else outside of this channel. And this idea is a significant principle of the methodology we use. And that's why we keep saying anyone who did not start interpreting the Quran from the stories really does not understand the rest of the Quran, because the repository of the semantics of the words, the meanings of the words, the indication of the divine lexicon, that repository is placed within the context of the Quranic stories. So therefore, first, before anything else, every person working on tafsir of the Quran must work on the stories, on the Quranic stories, to decipher the mysteries of these stories, to understand them correctly, and then take these words and apply them to the rest of the Quran. So if I come to give you legalistic opinions, fatwa regarding divorce, or regarding prayer, or regarding fasting, or regarding how to take ablution, wudu, all of them require that we understand very specific technical terms that are extracted from the Quranic stories. If I give you these legalistic opinions without first showing you where these words came from the stories, you're not going to believe me. You should not believe me. You should have the reference from the stories. This is extremely important. This is a significant part of the methodology that we use in this channel. So I hope this is clear, and I hope that you will take this very, very seriously. So to summarize, there is a strong relationship between locution and the Quranic stories. Therefore, Ayah 14:4, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا مِن رَسُولٍ إِلَّا بِلِسَانِ قَوْمِهِ لِيُبَيِّنَ لَهُمْ, so that Allah exposes to them, makes perfect sense. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exposes the truth after we know the stories that are told in the locution of the messengers about whom these stories are told. Every Quranic stories contains locution of its characters, not exclusively of course, but enough to give us clear indications as to what's going on. By the way, most Quranic stories are mysteries, are puzzles. You have to really work hard to decipher these stories. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put layers within layers of concealment within the stories on purpose, so that people who take the easy route, who take the lazy route, who are negligent in their effort to interpret the Quran, who rush to the ajila, don't get it right. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made sure that al-akhirah is acquired by people who really put the diligent effort and who really treat the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and ascribe to Allah the reverence that's due to Allah. So therefore, the locution provides us identifying clues, specific families or specific geographies, as we saw in the case of Ali Imran, etc. Clues of affiliation. Examples are the followers of the Abrahamic monotheism, which we learned about the wife of Musa. And then the clues of geography, as we saw in the case of the story of Maryam, where she went east and then she went back to her family, which is west, etc., etc. So therefore, one of the primary purposes of the Quranic stories is to preserve the semantics of the key words and expressions used throughout the Quran. This is really critical. We have to understand this, because without this principle, much of the Quran remains guesswork, remains depending on the opinion of this person or the opinion of that person, and thus we ended up with sects that are fighting, that are killing each other for over 1300 years now, and you all know what I'm talking about. Everyone wants to interpret the Quran as they please without referring back to the actual repository of these meanings and the semantics of the words. Understanding the story correctly allows us to understand the exact definition of the Quranic terms and expressions. So now we answer a very important question. Why do we refer to it as Abrahamic locution? Well, in Ayah 2684, right here, وَاجْعَلْ لِي لِسَانَ صِدْقٍ فِي الْآخِرِينَ, it is referred to as Lissān صِدْقٍ, the locution of truth. This is the supplication that Ibrahim made. Grant me, he said, grant me a locution of truth that becomes established or used or relevant to later generations. This is the dua that he made. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us that he dignified this dua. He accepted this supplication. So in Ayah 1949, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about Ibrahim again. فَلَمَّا اعْتَزَلَهُمْ, when Ibrahim forsook abandoned them, abandoned the people who were actually harassing him, the first group of people among whom he lived, and what they used to worship as intermediaries to Allah. We granted him Ishaq and Yaqub, and all of them we embedded, we included in their communities as prophets, as anbiya in this case. And we granted them from our mercy, and we embedded for them in their stories a prevailing locution of truth. A locution of truth. In other words, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dignified the supplication of Ibrahim, which meant that this Lissān of Ibrahim is actually included in the Quran. This is how we read it. This is how we understand it. Is that it? No, we're going to learn a lot more when we dive into the issue. What is Millat Ibrahim? Millat Ibrahim. So before we start discussing the definition, according to the Quran, of Millat Ibrahim, let's first discuss what Millat Ibrahim is not, so that we can empty our cup first. So we start by asking, what is it not? So we look at this ayah from Surah Al-Baqarah, ayah number 120. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is addressing Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He tells him, وَلَن تَرْضَ عَنْكَ الْيَهُودُ وَلَا النَّصَارَى حَتَّى تَتَّبِعَ مِلَّتَهُمْ قُلْ إِنَّ هُدَى اللَّهِ هُوَ الْهُدَى وَلَئِنِ اتَّبَعْتَ أَهْوَاءَهُمْ بَعْدَ الَّذِي جَاءَكَ مِنَ الْعِلْمِ مَا لَكَ مِنَ اللَّهِ مِنْ وَلِيٍّ وَلَا نَصِيرٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling him, and the Jews and the Christians shall not be content with you, Muhammad, until you follow their millah. Now I want you to pay attention. How many millah is included in this expression? The answer is one millah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not say milalahum, plural of millah. Allah did not say this. Allah said one millah for both of them, millatahum. As we saw earlier in the case of Lissān Dawood wa Isa ibn Maryam, one lisan for both of them. Here the same thing, one millah for both al-Yahud, the Jews, and al-Nasara, supposedly the Christians. Therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues, say, O Muhammad, indeed the guidance from Allah is the true guidance. And then Allah continues with instructions directly for our beloved. And if you follow their opinions after what you have received of the evidence-based knowledge, then you shall have no patron and no supporter to protect you from Allah. So before we go any further, I want to review with you. In front of you right here, we have the translations from the various translators of the Quran, and basically we will see that they match and they agree with the books of tafsir. So Sahih International refers to millatahum. Remember, millatahum is one for both of them, for both the Jews and the Christians, for both al-Yahud wal Nasara. Millatahum, one millah for both of them. And right away you see where the problem is. Do they really have one millah? In other words, what does the word millah mean in order for it to fit for both of them? That's a very critical question. This is how we observe the Quran. This is how we learn, and then we inquire, we ask daring questions, and then we verify. We verify, is the translation that we're reading correct? So, as you saw in here, until you follow their millah. So the question is, what is millah? So Sahih International defines it as religion. Mustafa Khattab defines it as faith. Muhammad Asad defines it as creeds, plural. Okay. Pickthall defines it as creed. By the way, with Muhammad Asad, you already see that he's thinking. He's observant. He's saying, they don't have a single creed, so it must be plural. But in Arabic, in the Arabic original, it's one millah. So he's thinking already, but he took some liberty and added the plural to the creeds, okay? Now, we continue with Pickthall. Pickthall chose creed. Yusuf Ali chose religion. Shakir chose religion. Muhammad Sarwar chose faith. And Muhsin Khan chose religion. And finally, A.J. Arbery chose religion. It is interesting to note that one Quran alone translation, a Quranist that provided the translation of the Quran using the so-called transtextual approach, also chose millah as creed. Okay, so the question is, the Jews and the Christians, Do they have a single creed? Do they have a shared creed? Really? Do they? Ask yourself this question. Do they have a single religion? Do the Christians among themselves, don't they have many different sects? Wasn't this the case during the time of our beloved ﷺ, at the time of revelation of the Quran? Therefore, how could the Quran not say milalahum, multiple creeds or multiple religions? The Quran insisted it is one for all of them. Therefore, it cannot possibly be religion or faith or creed, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows this is not the case. It must be multiple, but the Arabic says one, and therefore it is not related to religion or faith or creed, etc., etc. So, did the books of translation invent this concept? The answer is no. If we go to Tafsir al-Tabari, remember, Tabari died in 310 Hijri, that is 3 centuries after our beloved Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. In part 2, page 484, you can look it up. I made a cut and paste from the bottom of that page, 484, and the top of page 485. So, what does At-Tabari say? At-Tabari says, Al-Millah, right there in front of you, this word right here, Al-Millah, it is the religion. And the plural of it is Milal. So At-Tabari continues by saying, and please pay attention, because this is how they thought. This is how the authors of these books, and I'm not saying it is At-Tabari himself. We really don't know who wrote these books. As a matter of fact, we don't have the originals. We don't have even copies of the originals. The earliest manuscripts of all of these books go back to about 100 to 150 after the claimed date of publication. So therefore, we really don't know who wrote these books. So don't write to me and tell me you are bad-mouthing our scholars. No, I'm not. We don't even know who wrote these books. We don't know who actually penned them. We know whose name was claimed on top of them, and therefore we take it for granted that these are the real people who wrote these books. But we really don't have evidence of this. Please pay attention to this. So I'm not accusing any specific person. I'm telling you, whoever wrote these books, and you will see it for yourself, did not mean well for the Muslims. So they claim, whoever wrote this book, continue, Allah means that the clarification from Allah, bayan Allah, huwa al-bayanul muqna', is the real clarification. And wal qada'ul fasilu baynana, the clear distinction or judgment among us, among whom? Among Muslims versus non-Muslims, such as Jews and Christians. And then the author continues, فَهَلُمُّ إِلَى كِتَابِ اللَّهِ وَبَيَانِهِ. Come, let's review the book of Allah, Kitabillah. Please pay attention. I'm not making it up. I'm showing it to you. It is the page number right here. It is the part number right here. It's the book. It's very clear. فَهَلُمُّ إِلَى كِتَابِ. Come to the scripture or the book of Allah. وَبَيَانِهِ, and its clarification. الَّذِي بَيَّنَ فِيهِ لِعِبَادِهِ مَا اخْتَلَفُوا فِيهِ, in which Allah has revealed or exposed to people whatever they had disagreed about. You think he's talking about the Quran. And the shock comes and he says, وَهُوَ التَّوْرَاتِ, and it is the Torah, not the Quran. This is an author who is supposedly giving us a tafsir of the Quran. I'm showing it to you right there. And it is the Torah, التي تقرون جميعا بأنها من عند الله, which you all agree that it is sent by Allah. No, it was not. It was lost for 600 years before it was rewritten purely from memory. Everyone today knows this is part of the history of the so-called Torah that we have accessible, and that was accessible at the time of the revelation of the Quran. But this author had an agenda. The author, not At-Tabari himself. We don't know that these books were written by the names of the people that are inscribed on these books. So as you see right there, he refers to At-Tawrat, the Torah, as the book that we all agree that it is from Allah. Was he alone? No, he was not. Unfortunately, a lot of books of tafsir fell into the same type of ulterior motives and agendas, and I'm showing you right in front of your eyes. Now we go to other books of tafsir, for example, Al-Razi or Ibn Kathir. They use the word Deen for the word Millah. So it is exactly like At-Tabari, or the book according to At-Tabari. As-Samarqandi, this is another scholar who wrote tafsir on the Quran, had a different opinion, and that opinion was Qibla, meaning the orientation in prayer. Al-Baghawi, another one, he chose to define al-millah as at-tariqa. So, as you see, every single book of tafsir almost came up with their own opinion. Did they base it on something? No, they did not. As you see right here, أَمَّا الْمِلَّةِ فَإِنَّهَا الدِّينِ. He just made it up. He just decided it is deen. And therefore, all of these books of translation picked up the same idea and ran with it, and gave us the translations that millions are reading right now based on just an empty opinion. We're going to see it is purely a brain fart, excuse my language. It came from nowhere. Where did you come up with this concept that millah equal deen? He did not give us a justification. So now we continue with a very significant question. If millah is deen, then how come Allah combined the Jews and Christians in one millah? And I've already asked this question, in one deen. Did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make a mistake? Astaghfirullah? Of course not. It is their interpretation, their tafsir, and their translations that are wrong. Now, what is not millah? If we look at today's word in Turkish or Urdu or Farsi, we see millet or millat, which refers to nation or community. Again, clearly, they don't have one nation. They don't have a single community that joins all the Christians and the Jews. Therefore, it cannot possibly be referring to nation or community or deen or religion or creed or faith, whatever word you want to choose. They're not unified on one single thing. So therefore, what is the millah to which the Quran is referring to in this ayah up here when we discussed in ayah 2:120? So in order to understand this, we have to do the nested interpretation. We have to do the due diligence and really work hard to extract the meanings from the Quran. And that's the process we go through. It's a very simple process. So we look at Surah Al-Hajj 22:78. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is instructing us, وَجَاهِدُوا فِي اللَّهِ حَقَّ جِهَادِهِ هُوَ اجْتَبَاكُمْ وَمَا جَعَلَ عَلَيْكُمْ فِي الدِّينِ مِنْ حَرَجٍ مِلَّةَ أَبِيكُمْ إِبْرَاهِيمَ. He uses the word deen, and then he uses the word millah in the same sentence, which indicates they're not the same thing. Clearly, right there in front of your eyes. So why did the early scholars, so-called scholars, choose to equate deen and millah? I have no clue. They have the Quran in front of them. They could have asked these simple questions that we are asking. So, millata abikum Ibrahim, millat of Ibrahim, he named you Muslims before, meaning he is the one who chose the word Muslim as a label to apply to all of us, the followers of monotheism, according to the Abrahamic definitions of monotheism. So pay attention. Now we get the first clue. Millat is related to providing labels. One of those labels is the word Muslim or Muslimun or Muslimin, the plural of Muslim. So we get the first hint right there. The millat of your father Ibrahim, he labeled you the Muslims before, meaning during his time. So the obvious observation in here, if Ibrahim is the one who initially chose the label Muslim for us, then he clearly chose more labels than just this one label. Now we're starting to get the hint of what millat means. It has something to do with labels, with definitions, maybe with composition, as we see. So when he made the dua, وَاجْعَلْ لِي لِسَانَ صِدْقٍ فِي الْآخِرِينَ, is the locution, the word lisan, locution, related to the millah? We will see, and you will see for yourself. So therefore, all scriptures before the Quran have been lost in their original form. Their original forms were totally lost. or corrupted beyond recognition. They are not an authoritative source for people who want to engage and understand the Quran. This is really an important principle. The Abrahamic locution has not been preserved except as Allah preserved it in the Quran. So now we're building toward the understanding of what the word millah is. And with this, we move into the clear definition, the irrefutable evidence that gives us a very clear and simple definition of the word Millat Ibrahim from the Quran itself. We look at the longest ayah in the Quran, ayah 282. It takes a full page in the Quran, by the way. This is referred to as ayat Deen, the ayah regarding the loan or the debts. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, again, I'm not going to read the whole ayah, don't worry. I'm only going to focus on a couple of sentences and then translate them. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا تداينتم بدين إلى أجل مسمى فاكتبوه وليكتب بينكم كاتب بالعدل ولا يأب كاتب أن يكتب كما علمه الله فليكتب وليملل الذي عليه الحق وليتق الله ربه ولا يبخس منه شيئا فإن كان الذي عليه الحق سفيها أو ضعيفا أو لا يستطيع أن يمل هو فليملل وليه بالعدل. So this is part of the ayah, as I said. There is the rest of the ayah that is really not relevant to what we're talking about in here. We're going to focus on these three parts that are highlighted in yellow. Why? Because the word millah, as we will see, is derived from the gerund, from the root malla or malala, and we're going to see it. Now, we're going to give the translation in here. O you who claim to have believed in the past, if you take a loan with an agreed upon term, write it, meaning write it down in a contract. And let a scribe, example a notary, write for you in terms of equity, someone who is neutral, who really can capture the exact terms of the debt and the contract. And let not a scribe refuse to write as Allah taught him, and thus let him write, meaning the notary must write. This is part of the obligation. And here we learn a very important lesson. If you have the skills to help people, you have the obligation to provide such help, to use these skills in helping people. Can you get paid for it? Of course you can. But the point is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught you, and therefore use it, benefit from it. Bring its benefit to your community. Let's continue. And let the one upon whom the debt obligation dictate, meaning compose the what? The narrative, the text of the agreement, the sentences and the clauses of this contract that they're working on. Let the one upon whom the debt obligation is, let him dictate, and let him be disciplined in the way of Allah his Lord. Why is this required of the person upon whom the debt obligation is? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, you, the one who is taking the debt and has the obligation, should clearly define exactly what you expect in terms of returning it. As you're expressing it and writing it, the one who gave you the loan, the money, will be observing, did they get the conditions and the terms correctly? And therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is being fair to both of them by forcing the one who took the money to make sure that he is the one who elaborate all of the specific terms and conditions. So therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues, but if the one upon whom the debt obligation is incapable of knowing the correct vocabulary, pay attention now, because this is where it gets interesting. If the one who has the debt obligation is incapable of knowing the correct vocabulary, or is suppressed, meaning misinformed, or incapable of dictating, لا يستطيع أن يمل on his own, then let his appointed representative, waliyuhu, his appointed representative, let that representative dictate, meaning compose, in equity. So now we have the verb yumilla, walyumlil, 3 times used in one ayah within 2 lines of each other, clearly indicating narration, narrating, composing the text, the structure of the agreement, the sentences, the conditions, what we call the clauses of the agreement, of the legal agreement that is binding to both parties, that secures the right of the one who put up the money and secures the obligations upon the one who took the loan. I hope it's very clear. So the writing, the narration, the composition is used in the Quran by referring to the verb yumlil or yumil. This is the basis of the word millah. Are you shocked? Yes, it has nothing to do with whatever the translators or the interpreters, the books of tafsir, told us. By the way, this verb right here, yumil or yumlil, is only used in this ayah through the whole Quran. And its context is absolutely clear. So therefore, it's almost like a story. It's like a parable, because the details that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us is absolutely unquestionable. So therefore, now we go back and analyze linguistically the root of the word millah. There is no mystery about it. There's no secret to it. It is very, very obvious. So the word yumlil, he dictates onto another person, present tense. From the past tense, amlala. Yumillu is dictates onto another person, present tense. From the past tense, amalla. Both of them from the same gerund, malla or malala, which indicates to compose, to dictate, to create the sentences, to put them together, to weave the sentences, to represent the conditions of the term or the loan. Now, similarly, in Arabic, we use the word imla, which is dictation, and everybody knows this. Everybody who goes through Arabic school knows that one of the things that you have to pass is dictation, imla. We also notice that the word millat is from the morpheme fa'lat, millat, fa'lat, which indicates an occurrence or the effect of an act, meaning the result of doing something. So in this case, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us what the verb malala or malla really means, which is to dictate or to compose. Millah is the composition. So therefore, Millat Ibrahim is the composition by Ibrahim. It's very obvious, very clear. It is the millah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught to Ibrahim. More generally, it's the composition or narration style instituted by Ibrahim. It is very closely associated with the Abrahamic locution that we've been talking about for 2 years on this channel. I hope it's shocking, but it's also very obvious. No one can refute this. It is so much in front of your eyes. So now we ask, are we required to follow Millat Ibrahim? Who is required to follow Millat Ibrahim? Ayah 123 from Surah An-Nahl, Surah 16, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instructs our beloved sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, ثُمَّ أَوْحَيْنَا إِلَيْكَ, we enjoin to you, Muhammad, أَنِ اتَّبِعْ مِلَّةَ إِبْرَاهِيمَ حَنِيفًا, to follow the composition style, the narration style of Ibrahim. Hanif, I will leave this word till later. We're going to discuss it as I promised. And he, Ibrahim, was not among those who associated with Allah. So therefore, the composition style of Ibrahim is part of the instructions given to Muhammad. It makes perfect sense. Follow his composition style, meaning learn it and apply it in understanding the Quran. Very, very beautiful, very simple, very elegant. Why didn't they tell us? We will see. Another ayah, ayah 395 from Surah Ali Imran. قُلْ صَدَقَ اللَّهُ فَاتَّبِعُوا مِلَّةَ إِبْرَاهِيمَ حَنِيفًا وَمَا كَانَ مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ. Say, Allah has stated the truth, and thus follow all of you, plural, the composition style of Ibrahim, Hanifan, again we will see it later, and he, Ibrahim, was not among those who associate with Allah. So therefore, again, all of us are required to follow, to adopt, to understand, to use the millah of Ibrahim in understanding the Quran. Here's another ayah from Surah An-Nisa. وَمَنْ أَحْسَنُ دِينًا مِمَّنْ أَسْلَمَ وَجْهَهُ لِلَّهِ وَهُوَ مُحْسِنٌ وَاتَّبَعَ مِلَّةَ إِبْرَاهِيمَ حَنِيفًا وَاتَّخَذَ اللَّهُ إِبْرَاهِيمَ خَلِيلًا. we see the translation, who is better in fulfilling his commitment to Allah than someone who orients his outlook towards Allah exclusively while seeking the insight found within the ayat, وَهُوَ مُحْسِنٌ, and follows the composition style of Ibrāhīm Hanif. The rest, وَاتَّخَذَ اللَّهُ إِبْرَاهِيمَ خَلِيلًا, I will discuss it later, I promise you, just a few minutes coming in this same segment. So it's very clear that all of us are required to follow Millat Ibrahim, including Muhammad, our beloved himself. Now we go to Surah Yusuf. Yusuf again picked up the same concept. Remember, the concept of locution started with Ibrahim and then continued to Yaqub and then Yusuf and then to other messengers and prophets, including our own beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Yusuf is reported to have said to his prison mates in ayah 37 of Surah Yusuf, Surah 12, قال لا يأتيكما طعام ترزقانه إلا نبأتكما بتأويله قبل أن يأتيكما ذلكما مما علمني ربي إني تركت ملة قوم لا يؤمنون بالله وهم بالآخرة هم كافرون. I have renounced, this is only the yellow part right here, starting from here. I have renounced the composition style of a people who don't believe in Allah. This gives us the hint that there was some sort of scripture already. And Yusuf is teaching his fellow prison mates who are with him in prison that don't follow their way of composition. Read the scripture from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the right way. And he says, they are deniers of the hereafter. And in the delayed diligent understanding, they shall be deemed so. وَهُمْ بِالْآخِرَةِ هُمْ كَافِرُونَ. What else? He continues, وَاتَّبَعْتُ مِلَّةَ آبَائِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ وَإِسْحَاقَ وَيَعْقُوبَ مَا كَانَ لَنَا أَن نُشْرِكَ بِاللَّهِ مِنْ شَيْءٍ ذَلِكَ مِنْ فَضْلِ اللَّهِ عَلَيْنَا وَعَلَى النَّاسِ وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَا يَشْكُرُونَ. And I followed instead the compositional style of my forefathers, the patriarchs, Ibrahim, وإسحاق ويعقوب. I follow their millah, starting with Ibrahim, very clear. So he learned it also from Ishaq and Yaqub, which tells us that Yusuf had direct access to them. ما كان لنا أن نشرك بالله من شيء. It is not befitting for us to associate with Allah. And that's what I said earlier. Abusing the divine lexicon is a really bad form of shirk, of associating with Allah. So here Yusuf is making that declaration. We're not supposed to associate with Allah. How do we avoid associating with Allah? One of the ways is to make sure you follow the right millah, the right compositional style, the Abrahamic compositional style, including the Abrahamic locution. I hope the picture is starting to come more and more into focus. And then Yusuf continues, that is part of Allah's beneficence upon us and upon other people, but most people are not dutiful in expressing gratitude. وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَا يَشْكُرُونَ. It's not just gratitude, it's actually communicating with Allah through the language of the angels, as we've said before. So now it's very obvious that all of us are required to follow, to adopt, to accept, to learn, to apply Millat Ibrahim, the compositional style of Ibrahim. Now, do you think after all of these instructions, the Quran has nothing to do with the Abrahamic locution? You decide. I think it's very obvious. I think it's very clear. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala started by instructing our beloved and then all of us, and then gave us examples of prophet after prophet who have followed in that same Millat Ibrahim. Is that it? No. There is a warning to those who deliberately confuse and corrupt the divine lexicon. This is from YT93. Please refer to it. How to circumcise a she-cow. We talked about the ba'uda and how they played games with the words. This is part of the series Why No Stories Equal No Quran, part 2.2. We define the expression أَتَتَّخِذُنَا هُزُوًا. Are you perverting the divine lexicon and taking us in ridicule in the process? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is defining the word huzuwan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the same word in ayah 2:31. وَلَا تَتَّخِذُوا آيَاتِ اللَّهِ هُزُوًا واذكروا نعمة الله عليكم وما أنزل عليكم من الكتاب والحكمة يعظكم به واتقوا الله واعلموا أن الله بكل شيء عليم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is clearly inviting us not to take the signs of Allah, the verses of Allah, the ayat of Allah, huzuwan, that means perverting the divine lexicon as we defined it up in that video up here. يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تتخذوا الذين اتخذوا دينكم هزوا ولعبا من الذين أوتوا الكتاب من قبلكم والكفار أولياء. Don't take those who have taken your deen as huzuwan, meaning they perverted the divine lexicon, and games from those who have received the book before you and the rejectors. Don't take them as patrons. Don't take them as supporters. Don't take them as teachers. Don't take their lead. Don't accept any knowledge from them. This is what this ayah is telling us. This ayah again is warning us to avoid taking the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala huzuwan and so on. You can see the remaining ayat. One very specific scary paragraph is this part right here from Surah Al-Jathiyah, which starts right here. تلك آيات الله نتلوها عليك بالحق فبأي حديث بعد الله وآياته يؤمنون. These are our signs, we recite them to you in truth. In which discourse then, after Allah and His signs, do they believe? Notice the word hadith is referring to Allah and His signs. Hadith is referring to Allah and His signs. Hadith is not the prophetic narrations that they claim are called hadith. Whoever twisted that word, hadith, is doing huzuwan and is doing exactly the opposite of what this ayah is telling us. I hope you appreciate the significance of what we're reading right in front of our eyes. Woe to every sinning falsifier. Waylun likulli affakin athim. Notice the word affak, falsifier. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is using the word ifk and affak to refer to the people who are confusing the divine lexicon and twisting the meanings. He hears the signs from Allah being recited to him, and then he insists in conceit as if he has not heard them. يسمع آيات الله تتلى عليه ثم يصر مستكبرا كأن لم يسمعها فبشره بعذاب أليم. Give him then the glad tidings, this is sort of a mockery or irony, of a painful punishment of separation. Separation from what? From Allah. We continue. وَإِذَا عَلِمَ مِنْ آيَاتِنَا شَيْئًا اتَّخَذَهَا هُزُوًا. Again, this is the word we're focused on, huzuwan, perverting the divine lexicon. And if he learns or learned about some parts of our signs, he perverts its divine lexicon. He twists the meaning. You just saw with your own eyes what they did to the word millah. Did they do this on purpose? Did they do it for bad intentions? I leave it up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but I'm showing you with your own eyes how they perverted the clear, easy to get, easy to understand divine lexicon. Allah did not make it difficult. They made it difficult for us. I'm showing you the easy way of doing it. Had they taught us to do this from the beginning, the Quran would have been a lot easier for us. So don't accuse me of making it difficult. I'm the one who's showing you how easy it could have been had they not done the wrong things in the first place. To those people is arranged a demeaning punishment of separation. After them is a trail leading to Jahannam. من ورائهم جهنم ولا يغني عنهم ما كسبوا شيئا ولا ما اتخذوا من دون الله أولياء ولهم عذاب عظيم. After them is a trail to Jahannam, and of no benefit to them shall be anything they earned, nor any patron they took as intermediary between them and Allah. And to them is a prevalent punishment of separation. Now I want you to focus. Min wara'ihim Jahannam. Behind them or after them is a trail leading to Jahannam. Why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala use this language? Because the people who pervert the lexicon, the divine lexicon, leave a trail of misguided people. This trail leads people to Jahannam. We will define Jahannam in a future segment. But this ayah is telling us something very significant. Take the divine lexicon very seriously. Don't mess with it. Don't make false claims about it. Refer back to the Quran to really understand it. Otherwise, you're leaving behind you a trail of misguided people, leading them with you to Jahannam. I hope the message is very clear. I hope the message is causing you to shake in your boots, because you should. This is not a joke. We're not playing with the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're taking it very seriously, and we need to take it very seriously. Now we move to the definition of jahilun. We've seen this before, again in YT66. What does the story of Noah's son teach us about the whole Quran? And we talked about the word ahl, and we said very clearly the definition is cohort, someone who is associated with what you do, or familiar or competent in the same type of competence that the word is referring to. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told Nuh, قَالَ يَا نُوحُ إِنَّهُ لَيْسَ مِنْ أَهْلِكَ إِنَّهُ عَمَلٌ غَيْرُ صَالِحٍ. What you've done, Nuh, is not salih, not according to the terminology. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues, فَلَا تَسْأَلْنِي مَا لَيْسَ لَكَ بِهِ عِلْمٍ. If you don't have knowledge, don't use it in your supplication or your request to Allah. This is very clear, right in front of you. إِنِّي أَعِظُكَ أَن تَكُونَ مِنَ الْجَاهِلِينَ. Allah used the word jahilin to warn Nuh, lest he uses the word ahl in the wrong way. So the word jahilin is associated with the word ignorant, but the real meaning, according to the divine lexicon of the Quran, is someone who does not apply the divine lexicon correctly. Does this have significant impacts on understanding the Quran? Of course it does. So please refer back to this segment, YT66, and you will see the full definition. I'm just giving you a brief reminder about it. Now we move to the word Hanif. What does Hanif mean? If you remember, Millat Ibrahim Hanifan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described Ibrahim as Hanif. In Surah Al-An'am, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaches our beloved sallallahu alayhi wa sallam to say, قل إنني هداني ربي إلى صراط مستقيم دينا قيما ملة إبراهيم حنيفا وما كان من المشركين. Say, O Muhammad, my Lord has guided me to a methodology for self-correction, an established order based on principles, قيما. The compositional style of Ibrahim, Hanifan, Millat Ibrahim Hanifan. So the word Hanif is used in association with Millat Ibrahim, the compositional style of Ibrahim. Now it's starting to click for some of you, because the millah of Ibrahim is different than the millah of whom? The Jews and the Christians. And, by the way, the Arabic speakers, who we will see were opposed to what our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam was speaking, was saying. And they accused him of all sorts of things. And they specifically told him, as we will see, that they don't understand anything he's saying. We will see, inshallah, in very few minutes, so I hope you're patient. And the ayah continues, he was not among those who associated with Allah. The verb hanafa, if you look it up in the dictionary, it means to incline, to sort of swerve away from the main path, to take a tangent, we say, or to veer away from the main path, or the path of the herds. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is using a word that means to incline, to veer away, to define something good. So Allah is telling us Ibrahim did not follow the main track, the beaten path, so to speak. Ibrahim inclined or deviated or veered away from where the crowds were going. So this is the word Hanif. It means to incline or to veer away or to steer slightly on a tangent away from the crowds. But at the same time, وَمَا كَانَ مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ. He was not among those who associated with Allah. So in other words, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, don't follow the crowd, but at the same time, make sure as you steer away from them, your primary goal, your primary mission is to remain faithful to monotheism. Make sure you don't have any shirk or association with Allah. So how do we do it? We refer back to the words of Allah. That's how we make sure that we're following Millat Ibrahim, Hanif. We steer away from the crowd. We don't care about the approval or the affirmation by large numbers of people. What we care about is, are we following the discipline that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught us to learn and apply Millat Ibrahim, the Abrahamic locution. This is exactly what we're talking about. This is another ayah from Surah Al-Hajj, and I'll let you read it. This is another ayah from Surah Al-Imran. All of them fit beautifully as I just described. So this last ayah in here is a good conclusion. وَمَنْ يَرْغَبُ عَنْ مِلَّةِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ إِلَّا مَنْ سَفِهَ نَفْسَهُ. And who would choose to eschew, to reject Millat Ibrahim, the Millah of Ibrahim, except someone who causes himself to be feeble-minded, safih. So someone now can say, but the Quran was in Muhammad's tongue. The Quran clearly says, فَإِنَّمَا يَسَّرْنَاهُ بِلِسَانِكَ. We made it easy, they told us, in your tongue, in your language. No, it's not. That's not what it's saying. It is saying we have made it easy to comprehend. Remember the word yassara? We discussed this in the early part of the series on Dhul Qarnayn. سَنَقُولُ لَهُ مِنْ أَمْرِنَا يُسْرًا. Dhul Qarnayn was telling Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we will give him something that's easy to comprehend. Yusr. That's the definition of the word yusr. Yassarnahu makes it easy to comprehend. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it easy to comprehend using the locution of our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The locution of our beloved, yes, that means it fit nicely with whatever locution Muhammad was accustomed to. So therefore, it's not saying that the language of Arabic is what the Quran was brought in. Now we continue because there is something else. This ayah is prescriptive, not descriptive. In other words, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling him, let this be your Lissān. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling him, we made it easy so that it becomes your Lissān. So Allah is giving Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam the mission, لِتُبَشِّرَ بِهِ الْمُتَّقِينَ, to give the glad tidings about what? About the Quran? Maybe. Or about this Lissān. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is referring to muttaqeen. So give the glad tidings to the disciplined ones about this Lissān. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling him, learn it, make it your locution, and give the glad tidings to the muttaqeen. I hope this is what we're doing. We're carrying out the exact same mission that this ayah is talking about. I hope, inshallah, Allah will accept from us. Here this ayah is confirming the same thing. فَأَنَّمَا يَسَّرْنَاهُ بِلِسَانِكَ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَتَذَكَّرُونَ. So we made it easy to comprehend using your locution. Your locution should be the one in accordance with what's in the Quran. Perhaps they will remember. Well, how could they remember if the Arabs did not understand? Maybe this is referring to other people. Think about it. So this ayah is prescriptive, not descriptive. It instructs Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to use his understanding of the Quran as the basis for his locution, how he should learn to practice this locution. This should have been the locution for all Muslims. Pay attention. But instead, those who hijacked Islam and the interpretation of the Quran refused to abide by this prescription and forced their Qurayshi locution upon all Muslims. Now we're coming back to the very title of this segment, Quraysh versus Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who won? They kidnapped, hijacked Islam specifically using their locution and forced it upon all Muslims. And we are all still living the effect of their hijacking. The proof, I just showed you the translations that were done in this century, even in the last few decades, are still being written under the influence of what the Qurayshi people defined as Millah. They defined it as Deen wrongly. We're still following in their path 1400 years later. But even so, the Quran instructed Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam لا تحرك به لسانك لتعجل به. Don't animate your tongue with it yet. In other words, don't go spilling out the beans. Don't go tell everyone about this. During his life, of course. So what do? Well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, use it to give the glad tidings to the muttaqeen, to the disciplined ones. The disciplined ones need to learn it, and that's what we do on this channel. We give this information, perchance, inshallah, all of you will be among the muttaqeen who learn this locution, who learn Millat Ibrahim. This is the compositional style of most of the stories in the Quran and most of the Quran itself. So the obvious question is, what is the relationship between Millat Ibrahim, nesting, and Aṣ-Ṣarḥ? Millat Ibrahim is the compositional style and the locution of Ibrahim, both. Two different expressions pointing to the same thing pretty much. Nested interpretation is the collection of Quranic abstract concepts that are embedded within the Abrahamic locution. So when a story is talking about Ibrahim and Ibrahim is looking at a kawkab, we need to understand how Ibrahim understood the word kawkab, or the word shams, or the word qamar, etc. So therefore, in order to understand it, we need to do the nested interpretation, as we just did for the word millah. We dove into malala or malla, and we saw where it's used, we understood the context, and then we extract the meaning, the abstract meaning, and then we came back and applied it to all the verses that use Millat Ibrahim, and now we understood exactly what we're being instructed to do. Unfortunately, for 1400 years, Muslims did not do this. And finally, the word Aṣ-Ṣarḥ, the monument, remember, we talked about this in the segment that talks about will God expose his leg, and we talked about the story of the Queen of Sheba. This monument refers to the collection of all abstract concepts and how they relate to each other, and to help us dedicate our kursi as the divine Weltanschauung, Arshur Rahman, as we discussed in the segment about Ayatul Kursi and Solomon's horses, etc. So as you see, now we have a complete concept with Millat Ibrahim. It complements the Abrahamic locution beautifully, and thus we have a very strong justification for using the word Abrahamic locution to describe a significant part of the methodology that we use. So now we move to answering another question, which is, why is Ibrahim referred to as Khaleel? So in Ayah 4:125, وَمَنْ أَحْسَنُ دِينًا مِمَّنْ أَسْلَمَ وَجْهَهُ لِلَّهِ وَهُوَ مُحْسِنٌ وَاتَّبَعَ مِلَّةَ إِبْرَاهِيمَ حَنِيفًا وَاتَّخَذَ اللَّهُ إِبْرَاهِيمَ خَلِيلًا. It does not mean friend or companion. It does not, you will see. So who is better in fulfilling his commitment to Allah than someone who orients his outlook towards Allah exclusively, while seeking the insight found within the ayat, and follows the compositional style of Ibrahim, Hanif, as we defined it. Hanif, he veered off the beaten path of the crowds, of the cattle, of the an'am, of the herds, and he chose a clear path toward Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah has considered Ibrahim to be Khaleel, a throughway. Khaleel, where did I get this from? From the root khalala or khalla, which means to go through, to pass through something. So throughway, what does that mean? Ibrahim is a throughway. Ibrahim was the person through whom this lexicon became perfected and taught to other people, as we saw again and again in many parts of this segment. So when we read the next ayah from ayah 124 in Surah Al-Baqarah, وَإِذِ ابْتَلَى إِبْرَاهِيمَ رَبُّهُ بِكَلِمَاتٍ فَأَتَمَّهُنَّ قَالَ إِنِّي جَاعِلُكَ لِلنَّاسِ إِمَامًا. And when Allah exposed to Ibrahim knowledge of dignified words, the divine expressions, the supplications, the communication with the angels, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all of these things, and thus he perfected them. Who is he? Well, maybe Ibrahim perfected them, maybe Allah perfected them for Ibrahim, and Ibrahim learned them perfectly. That's what the words are saying in here. He, Allah, said, I am remanding you, making you as an exemplar for people, لِلنَّاسِ إِمَامًا. And thus, through Ibrahim, we have learned about this divine lexicon after they had been perfected. After these words and these expressions and these terms, Millat Ibrahim, the Abrahamic locution, became perfected with Ibrahim. So Ibrahim became a through way. Through him, the rest of mankind were allowed to learn about this divine lexicon. He, Ibrahim, then asked, and my descendants too? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answered, never shall the transgressors attain to my promise. Now we learn the word al-Zalimin. We've talked about this a little earlier. I told you this segment is going to be heavy on linguistics. It really is. So we have to understand the language of the Quran. Yes, we have to understand the locution that initially came through Ibrahim, Khaleel, through him. Yes, we do. With this, we come now to the important question of who was Shuayb. What can we learn about the story of Shuayb? Because of the limited time, we're not going to be able to get into the story of Shuayb fully, but we're going to cover quite a bit of the important stuff regarding Shuayb. Primarily, who was Shuayb? What city was he sent to? What community? And what was the main issue between Shuayb and his community? Again, this is very relevant to what we're discussing in this segment, which is the primary issue of the Abrahamic locution and the Millah of Ibrahim. So the important question is, who was Shuayb, and was Shuayb a descriptor for our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam? And you're gonna say, oh, here you go again. Well, just watch the evidence and allow yourself to learn, and you're gonna find out for yourself, as I did, that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was given so many different descriptors in the Quran, and that was a way for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to provide him and the muttaqun with information without those around them learning what they should not learn about the burgeoning and growing community of believers and muttaqun around our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we're going to start with some markings in the discourse about our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we start from Surah Al-Isra. Again, I'm not going to translate the whole thing. I give you the context so you can review it if you choose. But basically, we're going to highlight and translate parts of it that are relevant to the concept of the markings that allow us to relate the story of Shuayb to our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So in this paragraph from Surah Al-Isra, ending at 1793 and starting at 1789, and they said, we shall not believe to you. This is clearly addressing our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then among the things they said to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or they asked him, أو تسقط السماء كما زعمت علينا كسفا. I want you to focus on this. It is translated, and they said to Muhammad, we shall not believe in you or for you up here until hatta, and then this and this and this and this, and eventually they come to this part, أو تسقط السماء كما زعمت علينا كسفا, until you bring down upon us chunks of darkness from the heavens as you claimed. You claimed you could do this. That's what they said to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This happens to be a very clear marking that connected our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam to Shuayb. It's not the only one. We have many of them, but this is the first one I'm going to show you with your own eyes so you can realize that we're not making things up. We're following the Quran. We're allowing the evidence to lead us to learn. The second paragraph is from Surah Saba, Surah 34. Again, the paragraph starts at 34:6. وَيَرَى الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمَ الَّذِي أُنزِلَ إِلَيْكَ. It's addressing Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Those who have received ilm, evidence-based knowledge, they see that whatever has been made accessible to you Muhammad, from your Lord, min rabbika, huwa al-haq. It is the truth. And then it says many different things, and then eventually Allah makes a declaration, أَفَلَمْ يَرَوْا إِلَى مَا بَيْنَ أَيْدِيهِمْ وَمَا خَلْفَهُمْ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ وَالْأَرْضِ. Have they not looked or contemplated that which is before them, meaning they have access to because it came before them, and whatever comes after them, in this case Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, from as-sama, from the abstract understanding, wal-ard, the scripture, in nasha nakhsif bihimul ard. If we want, we would cleave the earth below them, as I translated it in here. If we will, we would cleave the earth below them. or we bring down upon them chunks of darkness from the heavens. أو نسقط عليهم كسفا من السماء. Again, this is a very clear marking that belongs to our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam. إن في ذلك لآية لكل عبد منيب. In this ayat, in this paragraph, clearly there is a sign. As I taught you, as I showed you before, every time the Quran gives us such a mark, such a signature at the end of a paragraph, إن في ذلك لآية, I've just given you a sign, pay attention. Did you pick it up or did you miss it? If you missed it, stop. What am I missing? So here, the case that we're looking at, this paragraph, this happens to be a clear marking. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, pay attention, this is a special mark, special label, special relation that you're gonna look for to discover that this person I'm talking about, which is Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in this case, is related to some other story, and you're gonna see it. In this, there is a sign for every returning wayfarer, Abdin Munib. So the third paragraph is from Surah At-Tur, again the same thing. أَمْ تَسْأَلُهُمْ أَجْرًا فَهُمْ مِنْ مَغْرَمٍ مُثْقَلُونَ. Are you asking them for a financial reward, and that's what they're suffering from or they're complaining about? أَمْ عِنْدَهُمُ الْغَيْبِ فَهُمْ يَكْتُبُونَ. Or do they know the unforeseen, the undisclosed, and they write for people what they know about the undisclosed, etc., etc. أَمْ لَهُمْ إِلَهٌ غَيْرُ اللَّهِ. Or do they have a deity other than Allah? وَإِنْ يَرَوْا كِسَفًا مِنَ السَّمَاءِ سَاقِطًا يَقُولُوا سَحَابٌ مَرْكُومٌ. I want you to pay attention now, because this is again the same marking, sama, saqit, sahab, kisaf. All of these words occurred in these markings right here in this first paragraph and in the second paragraph. But here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching us something new. If they see kisafan, if they see chunks of darkness, kisafan, from the heavens, from as-sama, literally Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mocking them. Pay attention. This is not about the scripture. This is about literally darkness coming from the heaven, meaning dark clouds or whatever. In the case of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Abrahamic locution says darknesses from the layers of understanding. In other words, obstruction in their understanding. But what they say, what they understand is, they would say heaped clouds, meaning dark clouds. So they don't understand the language of the Abrahamic locution. This is what this ayah is teaching us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making fun of them, kind of. So if they see the chunks of darkness coming from the heavens, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning layers of darkness that prevents them from understanding, they don't care. They say this is just some clouds and they're gonna pass. So again, it's about the language. Remember the situation with circumcising a she-cow. This is exactly what was going on. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is using one language, they're misunderstanding it and misrepresenting it and abusing it and understanding something totally different. The point is, this group of people about whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking, they don't understand this locution. This is the key issue of this ayah right here. But the important thing, it confirms that this theme of chunks of darkness coming down from the heavens or from the layers of understanding, meaning preventing them access to the layers of understanding, and it is preventing them from having access to the true understanding of the scripture. This theme is part of the descriptions that are given to the story of our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So far we have 3 of these markings. If we go to the story of Shuayb now, by the way, I'm going to come back to this Surah Al-Hajj, so just 1 second, to see again who was Shuayb. Continued, another marking, very similar marking, but this time in the case of the story of Shuayb. So this is from Surah Aṣ-Ṣarḥ, Surah 26. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes that the group of people to whom Shuayb was sent, in this case they are described as Ashabul Aikati. When Shuayb said to them, why don't you be disciplined? أَلَا تَتَّقُونَ إِنِّي لَكُمْ رَسُولٌ أَمِينٌ. Pay attention to this, we're going to come back to it. And then he goes on telling them a whole bunch of things. And then their response is, they said, you are among those who are inflicted by magic or affected by magic or bringing magic. Remember, who are the two people who brought magic? And we talked about this before. In this case, the discussion is about Shuayb, and yet magic is brought into the discussion, into the discourse. And then they continue. وَمَا أَنْتَ إِلَّا بَشَرٌ مِثْلُنَا. You are just a human being just like us, and we think you are among the liars. فَأَسْقِطْ عَلَيْنَا كِسَفًا مِّنَ السَّمَاءِ. Bring down chunks of darkness from the heavens. This is their words, but it's not used in the proper way according to the Abrahamic locution. This is a marking, clear marking, between the story of Shuayb and the story of our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as we saw in these 3 paragraphs up here. So, is that it? No, there is more. قال ربي أعلم بما تعملون. These are the words of Shuayb. قال ربي أعلم بما تعملون. Where else did we see this? Right here in Surah Al-Hajj. This is about Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. وَإِن جَادَلُوكَ فَقُلِ اللَّهُ أَعْلَمُ بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ. This is a unique marking only for Shuayb and our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this is unique marking number 2. All of these things are unique markings. Unique markings. They didn't happen for any other prophet or messenger or any other Quranic story in the Quran. So this is 2 so far. Is that it? No, there's a third one, a very important third one. إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَةً. Again, just like in here we saw إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَةً لِكُلِّ عَبْدٍ مُنِيبٍ. Here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is reminding us to seek the sign He just gave us. Here in the case of Shuayb, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is also telling us إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَةً وَمَا كَانَ أَكْثَرُهُمْ مُؤْمِنِينَ. Pay attention. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is disclosing to us, أكثرهم, at least 50% of them, they were not believers. Why is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling us about the people of Shuayb not being believers? You're gonna see, this is very relevant. You're gonna understand exactly where and to whom Shuayb was sent. In other words, our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as you will develop the conviction by yourself. The next one that we're gonna focus on, Shuayb said, إِنِّي لَكُمْ رَسُولٌ أَمِينٌ. Rasul, not Nabi. This ayah is very clear. He is Rasul. Rasulun Amin. So these are the 2 notes that I just shared with you right here. We go to one more marking, the marking of وَلَا تُفْسِدُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ بَعْدَ إِصْلَاحِهَا. This is a third exclusive marking to our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam. وَلَا تُفْسِدُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ بَعْدَ إِصْلَاحِهَا. This is part of the Quran. In other words, part of what Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam recited and said and commanded people around him. Don't corrupt in the scripture after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has perfected its terminology, إِصْلَاحِهَا. And in the case of Shuayb, now really pay attention. وَإِلَى مَدْيَنَ. We sent Shuayb to Madian. Madian, we're going to see exactly what that word means. I've described it in prior segments before, but we're going to see a little bit more. Shuayb was sent. He is a brother of theirs. In other words, they were his people. They were part of his community. So Madian is the community of Shuayb, and he was one of them. And he said to them, وَلَا تُفْسِدُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ بَعْدَ إِصْلَاحِهَا. The exact same marking. Are these coincidences? If you believe in coincidences, then you're really not ascribing to Allah His due reverence, and or you don't believe in the veracity of the Quran. One of the 2 or both. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not make mistakes. There are no coincidences in the Quran. So all of these markings, exclusive in the case of these 3 that we just shared with you, they're only applicable to Shuayb on one hand, the stories of Shuayb, and the stories or what our beloved Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam brought in the form of the Quran. We have one more unique marking that makes 4. The unique marking of أَوْفُوا الْكَيْلَ وَالْمِيزَانِ. Again, this is part of the Quran. وَأَوْفُوا الْكَيْلَ وَالْمِيزَانِ. The instructions given to us in the Quran brought by Muhammad. In other words, the wahi that was given to our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the instructions that were given through him to us and to him. وَأَوْفُوا الْكَيْلَ وَالْمِيزَانِ. And be fair, or establish the equity in whatever you measure and in the scale. The same exact word in the story of Shuayb, وَإِلَى مَدْيَنَ أَخَاهُمْ, and to Madian we sent their brother Shuayb, one of them. And among the things he said, أَوْفُوا الْكَيْلَ وَالْمِيزَانَ, the exact same marking, the exact same instruction. What does that mean? Now we have not just one, not just two, not just three, 4 exclusive markings related to Shuayb. I hope this is impressing you, but we're not done. So now we have at least a few more things. I'm only gonna share with you 2 more. Madian literally means the place of Deen. It is derived from the morpheme maf'al, just like mat'am, and it means the place of something, the place of Deen in this case. So what is the place of Deen? As we know from our history regarding Ibrahim and our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it was clearly Mecca. So we have seen all of these markings, we have seen all of these signals, including Rasulun Amin. Remember this one. This is a huge hint. We're gonna come back to this in some future segments, but in this case, in the case of the people of Madian, he was to them a Rasul. And remember our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he was in Mecca, I explained to you before, he was in Mecca a messenger, a Rasul, and eventually got the instructions to add to his role, to add to his office, so to speak, the role of a Nabi, an additional role on top of being a Rasul. And then he went to Medina, as we learn from his stories in the Quran. And then in Medina, he practiced an additional role still while the Quran was being revealed and made accessible to him. So therefore, he became both a messenger and a Nabi, a Rasul and a Nabi, until the prophethood role ended and until the messenger role ended. So now we understand there's something really critical going on in here. So Shuayb was only a Rasul, and that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him a different descriptor to distinguish between the person who was Muhammad as a messenger versus the person who was Muhammad also as a Rasul and a Nabi, and so on and so forth. So different descriptors in the Quran play a very critical role to allow us to distinguish who is being addressed in the Quran. For our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that was a concealed way for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give him information, and he was reciting it out loud, reciting the Quran, people memorizing the Quran, but he was able to comprehend the nuances and the details in ways that those around him did not necessarily fully understand. Of course, there were close companions that our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam shared all of this information with, or at least part of this information with, and some of them were able to talk, some of them were prevented from talking. Very simple. We know history, we can read history, and this is exactly what happened. Those who knew said very little, those who did not know said a lot. And this is the history of everything that we have in the compendiums of narrations and reports and seerah and all of this stuff. Unfortunately, this is the truth. If you investigate, real serious scholars really understand this. So now, is that it? No, now there is something very curious about Shuayb. What is the primary disagreement with Shuayb? In other words, what did his people, the people of Madian, disagree with him about? So let the Quran teach us. We're gonna follow the Quran, we're gonna learn from the evidence of the Quran, and we're gonna see where does it take us. So in the case from Surah Al-A'raf, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaches us, قال الملأ الذين استكبروا من قومه لنخرجنك يا شعيب. They're addressing Shuayb. This is the story about Shuayb. لنخرجنك يا شعيب. The elite among his community who have been conceited, استكبروا, they said, O Shuayb, we shall expel you from our قرية, Qari. Qari is a group of people on the wrong opinion. Basically, that's what it means. That's the word قرية. أو لتعودن في ملتنا. Either that or you return to our millah. Our millah, composition style. I told you that was the main disagreement between Muhammad ﷺ and the people of Quraysh. The Quran is scandalizing them, is revealing their history, is revealing the root of disagreement between Muhammad and Quraysh. As a matter of fact, the only mention of Quraysh in the whole Quran is Surah Quraysh, 4 ayah, very short ayah, as a matter of fact, incomplete sentences to teach them that the language they claim and took pride in and their locution did not matter as far as the Quran is concerned. We will talk more about Surah Quraysh some other time. But for now, this is the fundamental disagreement. Either you come back to our millah, لَتَعُودُنَّ فِي مِلَّتِنَا, or we're going to expel you, not just you and those who believed with you. Did this happen? Do we have another janah to this issue? Yes. قَرِيَتَكَ الَّتِي أَخْرَجَتْكَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaches us about Muhammad, addressing Muhammad, your coterie that expelled you. قَرِيَتَكَ الَّتِي أَخْرَجَتْكَ. Therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us about what they threatened and told us that they actually did this. Do we know this from history? Yes, we do. It's very simple. So this is clearly fitting like hand in glove regarding our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And yet the story is about Shuayb. Then what they said, قَدْ افْتَرَيْنَا عَلَى اللَّهِ كَذِبًا إِنْ عُدْنَا فِي مِلَّتِكُمْ. If we accept your locution, your way of interpreting the divine narrative, Shuayb is saying this, if we accept your way, then we would have concocted lies against Allah if we return to your compositional style, after Allah has rescued us from it. Now, what do you think was going on here? It seems that this conflict that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us about regarding Muhammad versus his coterie, meaning Mecca and Quraysh specifically, there is something else going on. This is not what we were told about regarding some idols or some rites to, serve the pilgrims or things of that nature. They told us that was the primary disagreement. The Quran is scandalizing them. It's telling us that there was a totally different root of disagreement. The root of disagreement in here, as this paragraph is explaining, they were forcing them to interpret the Quran according to the locution of Quraysh. And Muhammad ﷺ is clearly ordered to tell them, we would concoct lies against Allah if we return to your millah. In udna fi millatikum. Millah, one millah. This case, it makes sense. Quraysh, one coterie. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about one coterie, one qaryah. وَمَا يَكُونُ لَنَا أَن نَعُودَ فِيهَا إِلَّا أَن يَشَاءَ اللَّهُ رَبُّنَا وَسِعَ رَبُّنَا كُلَّ شَيْءٍ عِلْمًا. And it is not befitting for us to return to it, to your millah, unless Allah, our Lord, wills so. The knowledge of Allah encompasses every part of the scripture. Only Allah we accept as arbitrator. عَلَى اللَّهِ تَوَكَّلْنَا. So this is the part that I translated out of this paragraph, and you get the sense that what we were told about the root of disagreement between Muhammad and Quraysh, the people of Mecca, is not what the Quran is telling us. The Quran is telling us a totally different perspective, a totally different point of view. Now, we go to another segment in the Quran, 1191. قالوا يا شعيب ما نفقه كثيرا مما تقول. They said, O Shuayb. Who's they? The same group of people, obviously, because here it is talking about millah. I want to stop here and let you reflect. Now you understand why we were told by the Qurayshite that the disagreement was about religion. No, the disagreement was about millah. If you don't return to our millah, we shall expel you and those who were with you, addressing Muhammad. Clearly, it is explained in here in Surah Hud. We don't understand, they said to Shuayb, meaning to Muhammad. We don't understand much of what you say. And we see you among us, وَإِنَّا لَنَرَاكَ فِينَا ضَعِيفًا, weak. And if it weren't for your branch of the tribe, your branch of the community, your branch of the family, so to speak, we would expel you immediately. وَمَا أَنْتَ عَلَيْنَا بِعَزِيزٍ. You are not that dignified. You are not that special to us. This is from Surah Hud 1191. The key point is, we do not comprehend much of what you say. This is what we've been saying. The Arabs, especially the people from Quraysh, did not understand the Quran. So when they hijacked Islam and moved the capital of Islam from Medina to Damascus, a city that remained majority Christian for 300 years, according to historians, this is not just my opinion, that capital of Islam that remained majority Christians under the control of the Umayyad, as history told us, the same Umayyad that really were threatening to expel our beloved Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam along with his believers, and actually did this. They expelled him. They were telling him, we don't understand much of what you said. Is that clear now? Is that really becoming more and more obvious? Is the Quran protecting the truth so that after 1400 years, we're still able to see through the clouds of darknesses that they tried to pull over our eyes? We're still able to see the truth preserved for our benefit, for our sake, by the mercy of Allah. You judge. I'm putting these facts in front of your eyes. You accept them, that's between you and Allah. You reject them, that's also between you and Allah. Incidentally, if you want to kick the messenger and curse the crutch that is helping you walk correctly, that is also your choice. And I complain to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if you choose to do this. Another paragraph from the Quran that we have seen already, this is from Surah An-Nisa, أَيْنَمَا تَكُونُوا يُدْرِكْكُمُ الْمَوْتِ, etc., etc. فَمَا لِهَؤُلَاءِ الْقَوْمِ لَا يَكَادُونَ يَفْقَهُونَ حَدِيثًا. What is with this community? They can barely understand even in the least the discourse that is given to them. And then finally in Surah Fussilat, it's addressing Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. مَا يُقَالُ لَكَ إِلَّا مَا قَدْ قِيلَ لِلرُّسُلِ مِنْ قَبْلِكَ. Whatever is being said to you, Muhammad, is the same thing that has been said to messengers before you. In other words, if by chance you guys think that Shuayb is different than Muhammad, remember that the same thing happened to Muhammad. So even if you can't figure it out, if you cannot figure out that Shuayb equals Muhammad, Shuayb is a descriptor of Muhammad, then remember the Quran is telling us whatever was told to Muhammad is the same thing that was told to earlier messengers, including if you think Shuayb is a different one. So this is an amazing disclosure that confirms everything we have said so far. Incidentally, why the descriptor Shuayb? Please pay attention because this is really beautiful. The descriptor Shuayb comes from sha'aba, which means to branch. Sha'aba, the root sha'aba. So in one ayah of the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that there is a certain character described as ظِلٍ ذِي ثَلَاثِ شُعَبٍ, a shadow. A shadow is a reference in the Abrahamic Locution to seeking shelter and seeking help from Allah. In other words, supplication. A supplication taught to us by a person with three branches. Three branches. The last one was Shuayb, the smallest one, Shuayb from Fu'ail, the miniaturization of Sha'b or Shu'ab or Sha'ba. So the miniaturization, the smallest one, the last one, so to speak, the youngest one is Muhammad. Who are the other two? The other two that belong to Ibrahim also, the first one was Ishaq, the second one was Yaqub, and the last one, the last branch in the branches of Ibrahim was Muhammad. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala referred to him as Shuayb. I hope this makes sense. It's absolutely beautiful. And by the way, I just gave you the interpretation of a verse, of an ayah from the Quran that no one has been able to figure out before I just shared it with you. And no, I'm not being arrogant. I'm explaining to you that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows you to see things and you share them with people, you should be confident and affirm and declare in front of the world that you trust Allah, that you trust the Quran, that the Quran is consistent, it's coherent, its parts are congruent, and they're connected, and they're linked, and they're beautifully integrated with each other. This is the confidence I'm showing you. Don't confuse my confidence in Allah and the Quran with arrogance. These ideas are not from me. This understanding is a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I share it with you to the best of my abilities. I hope you accept these gifts. So now, there's an obvious question. Did our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam predict and warn about what happened regarding the hijacking by the Qurayshite, taking Islam away from originally what it was supposed to be, which is the locution of Ibrahim to use in understanding the Quran, to their locution, to positioning themselves as dominant over the language of the Quran? Did our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam predict this? Again, we're going to go to what we consider history, not necessarily religious information. But part of the history, we accept some narrations if we are sure that the language, the locution, is consistent with the Quran. This hadith is reported originally by An-Nasa'i in his book As-Sunan Al-Kubra, and by the collection of Imam Ahmad. And these are the numbers right here, and this is the source right here. This is the website address if you want to check it out for yourself. The hadith says they were gathered, our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam along with many of the companions, and our beloved said, إن منكم من يقاتل على تأويله كما قاتلت على تنزيله. Some of you sitting here shall end up fighting for the interpretation of the Quran, just like I had fought for making it accessible, tanzilihi, making it available, revealing it to us. So our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam was saying, I had to fight to preserve its revelation. You, at least one of you, shall fight to preserve its interpretation. This is a prediction into the future, a historical piece of information, nothing more. If you accept it, that's good. If you don't accept it, it's up to you. It's not really relevant to much of what we said before, but it affirms, it corroborates everything we've discovered so far. So the hadith continues, or at least the report continues. Abu Bakr and Umar stood up and they asked, we, meaning one of us, and our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, no, but the one who is repairing the shoe. The hadith itself continues. It says, Ali ibn Abi Talib, the Prophet's son-in-law and cousin, he was repairing the shoe at that time. The report is from Abu Sa'id al-Khidri, a very reliable companion, close companion of the Prophet ﷺ. Al-Muhaddith, the one who investigated this hadith, is Shuayb al-Arnaut, and there's a book name and the page number, etc., etc. And the conclusion is, it is reliable, it is sahih. Accept it, don't accept it, it's really irrelevant to the rest of this segment. The point is, our beloved ﷺ knew that there will come a time where the fight would not be about the accessibility to the ayat of the Quran, but the way the Quran is interpreted. And that fight, that major fight, to which our beloved ﷺ pointed to Ali bin Abi Talib and said, he is the one, the major fight was between Muawiyah and Ali bin Abi Talib. In other words, the Umayyad, the majority of Quraysh, about whom we're talking about in the story of Shuayb, and Ali bin Abi Talib. You all know this is part of history. This is undeniable. I'm not sharing with you anything new. I'm just showing you the evidence from the Quran. I'm showing you how the Quran preserved history for us despite everything they tried to do. So when you get the notes, you will be able to read the full translation on this and the reference, etc., etc. Now we get to the point of answering the question, why did they not understand the Quran? Why does the Quran appear so enigmatic to us? And it's very obvious. If you've been with me all through this segment, you know exactly the answer. If a very simple word, millat, they could not even understand, or they tried to confuse us so we don't understand it, then for sure the rest of the Quran would not be available for us to understand. It would appear enigmatic, confusing, full of contradictions. Yes, because they did this on purpose. They changed the meanings of the words, as I just showed you. Now, I want to assume, under the best of circumstances, that the mistakes happened because of some ignorance, not necessarily ill will toward Islam or the Quran or our beloved, as I just showed you. Let's assume the best of intentions. Still, If you are a goldfish in an aquarium, you think that your aquarium is the whole world, with no clue that there is a whole ocean outside. The authors of the early books of tafsir, the authors, not the people whose names are written on the front page. I'm not accusing At-Tabari. I'm not accusing Imam Ahmad. I'm not accusing those whose names are on the books. I'm saying there are some scribes who actually wrote the books. The authors of these early books of tafsir thought that the Quran was sent for their aquarium, for their locution. They were part of Quraysh, as you know. The Umayyad took control of Islam for over 93 years. And according to their rules of engagement in their aquarium. In other words, this is ours. It's talking about us. It's addressed to us. We will tell you what it means. Here I have a brief email from a subscriber, a really amazing and beautiful email. I just wanted to share with you some things about the locution, the concept of locution, how beautiful people can understand this very easily. It's really not complicated. So she says, or he says, in Tamil language, there is a saying which literally translates into English as, he broke your nose and sent you away. Someone outside that group of people, or whoever is not used to that phrase, could easily think that a physical fight happened. But the real meaning is, you have been humiliated and put in your right place by that person after losing an argument. So the locution does not translate well, but if you translate it, they would say, he broke your nose and sent you away. A local person, a person who is familiar with that locution, would understand exactly what was said. This is Abrahamic locution, but in the Tamil language. This is the equivalent. So this is the idea. This is a very simple concept. So we can translate it into Arabic. It doesn't mean the Arabs understood it. This is exactly what we're saying. So in order to understand these idioms and expressions and even terminology and words, you have to think like the Abrahamic people did. I hope this makes sense. Here's another example. In Malay, it's pronounced, I hope I don't butcher it, apologies if I do, Burong Terbang Dipipiskan Lada, which is translated in English as rubbing chili paste on a flying bird. In English, it sounds like nonsense. Of course it does, because translations of these idioms and metaphors don't make sense. But Malays could easily understand that it means wasteful, useless action. So again, locutions happen in every language, and they do cross from language to language. It doesn't mean that the target language, the people who speak that language, understand these locutions. This is exactly what happened. People who took control and hijacked Islam worked to translate, but they did not think about the locution, the Abrahamic locution, and they missed at least 80% of the meanings deposited within the Quran. I hope you accept this knowledge. I hope you accept this magic key that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making available to us. We're not making it up. We're bringing a depth of information that has been unparalleled in the last 1400 years. Those of you who invest the time, who take the time to really study and learn, are discovering it by themselves. I hope you're one of them. So in closing, I want to leave you with a couple of things. The Abrahamic locution is part of Millat Ibrahim, the compositional style of Ibrahim. The word Ibra refers to something that's trans language. Did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tell us that there are some things that are crossing the barrier of languages and they don't translate very well? Yes. So for example, at the end of Surah Yusuf, لَقَدْ كَانَ فِي قَصَصِهِمْ عِبْرَةٌ. In their stories, you have to do the trans-language translation. In other words, just like this email with these two example locutions in here, just merely translating them doesn't do justice to the original intention of the expression or the idiom. You have to work harder on it. You have to go back and think like the original people thought. What did that idiom or metaphor mean? The second comment, Millat Ibrahim must be learned from the Quran. There is no way to learn it from the 7th century Arab poets. This is not the right source for us. And no, we cannot learn it as some has said. You have to put the Quran, literally he did his hands like this. You have to put the Quran side by side with the old scriptures and then you understand the real Abrahamic locution. And he is an imam leading Muslims in a major mosque in the United States. This is an imam speaking in the name of Islam, and he's saying this. We cannot learn Millat Ibrahim except from the Quran, except with the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, except with dhikra. I taught you about dhikra. I hope you take advantage of it. When you read the Quran, you need to allow it to teach you its own style, its own expressions, terms, how it uses pronouns, how it links different verses to each other using markings, as we just saw, how it weaves its sentences, how it delineates sentences across ayat, how stories are elucidated and illuminated at a distance, meaning far apart within the 6,236 ayah. You may find a link how Zubur is applied and no, Zubur is not the scripture of Dawood. Dawood was a Nabi. He did not bring a scripture. Get it through your head. This information should be taken from the Quran, not from the corrupted earlier scriptures. According to the Quran, Dawood used Zubur just like our beloved Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam used Bayinat and Zubur. Zubur are the layers of concealment. We talked about this in prior segments. We continue. How evidence is provided, how many evidence at a minimum. We talked about janah and wings, and what constitutes proof, etc., etc. All of this stuff constitute Millat Ibrahim collectively, including the methodology. So Millat Ibrahim is very, very consistent, integrated system of thought, integrated system of writing. It's like if you are a computer programmer, when you read a program using Java, and then you go read another program using another language, whatever other language you read, they're two different systems. You have to understand the terminology of each system within itself, not by borrowing from somewhere else. You cannot understand a book of philosophy by borrowing mathematical principles and terms from a book of mathematics. It doesn't work that way. You have to understand philosophy on its own term, using its inner logic. You have to become familiar with the logic and the terms and the processes and the methodologies of the Quran. That is called Millat Ibrahim. I hope it's really clear. All of this needs to be done for a very simple reason. The Quran must be allowed to program our neural networks before we can attain to receive the divine guidance according to Millat Ibrahim. And then we have Yusr. Then it becomes easy to understand, easy to grasp. My recommendation, take the time to learn. I know this segment has been long. Please watch it again and again. It is full of treasures. It is full of information. It is full of disclosures that will affect you for the rest of your life if you take it seriously. If you dismiss it and make fun of it, and you want to attack it, and you want to criticize it, the burden is on you, and I will be a witness against you on the day of judgment. Know this. This is totally different than what they taught you before. Take it seriously. Change what you thought. Empty your cup. Accept the gift. None of us know how long our life on this earth is going to remain. So please don't play games with your afterlife. This is my parting advice to you. I thank you very much for paying attention and staying with us on this long segment. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant you and grant me the patience to understand and to learn and to bring this knowledge to all people who really need to learn it. We close with the dua that we always close with. Alhamdulillah alladhi hadana lihada wa ma kunna linahtadiya lawla an hadana Allah. Laqad ja'at rusulu rabbina bil haqq. Thank you very much for watching. Salamun alaykum.